This guy got a notice saying he was expelled. Ed Roth Taylor is a noble, but he still got kicked out and treated like a poor person. The students who are usually afraid of him now don't know if they should keep being scared of Ed. After all, he got kicked out. The arrogant jerk hated by everyone isn't the real him. Ed is a character in a game, a terrible person nobody wants to be friends with, and our protagonist reincarnated into this guy's body. The other students walking by celebrated this arrogant guy getting thrown out. In this world, Ed can see his stats, and unfortunately, his character is just as weak as he is awful. His stamina, intellect, and talent are a joke. In the original story, this character was a noble who would get beaten up by the game's protagonist, kicked out of his noble family, and end up as a beggar. But our guy is determined to change his fate. Since he got kicked out of the academy dorms, Ed moved to the forest near the school. He will be kicked out of his family too, but if he graduates from school, his future is safe. At this academy, even poor people have a bright future when they graduate. That's it. Ed just needs to survive here and go to classes. The immediate goal is simpler. Survive the next 10 days until the semester officially begins. He knows this stretch of the game is brutal, but he also knows it matters. To get away from the stairs, Ed slips off academy grounds and into the nearby forest. Day 1 is rough. He tries cutting logs and moving them with magic, but his reserves are so thin that basic effort leaves him drained and hungry. He attempts to make stew from tree bark, a recipe from some story his grandfather told him, and it goes about as well as you'd expect. The bark is inedible. He files that lesson away and moves on. What he can do is build. He cuts logs, constructs a frame, puts it all together piece by piece, and by the end of it, he has a shelter. His stats tick up slightly, and he earns a small achievement. It's not much, but it tells him something useful. He may be terrible at magic, but he's good with his hands. He leans into it. He crafts a harpoon, another achievement unlocked, heads to the water and catches fish. He cooks them, eats properly for the first time in 2 days, and for a moment things feel almost manageable. Then he hears someone behind him. He turns, and it's Princess Fania, third princess of the Klol Empire, and the person who exposed his cheating during the entrance exam. She's the reason he lost everything, and from the look on her face, she's not happy to find him still here. Fania makes her position clear. Ed is shameless, and he needs to go. The problem is, she's not just voicing an opinion. She has the ability to see through lies, which means if she decides to push this, Ed has no defense. Getting reported by her isn't a setback. It's the end. While she's laying into him, Ed notices his fish catching fire. Bad timing on all fronts. He knows he can't argue his way out of this. So instead, he does something unexpected. He bends down and thanks her, genuinely. Fania pauses, checks for deception out of reflex, and finds nothing. That throws her. She knows exactly who the Roth Taylors are. A family with a history of human experimentation, widely regarded as people the world would be better off without. But Ed's situation is a little different. He's already been cut off by them, which, in the context of this academy, is actually the one thing keeping him here. If he still carried that name with full family backing, this conversation would have ended much worse. With the tension slightly diffused, Ed starts paying attention. Fania is alone, no escort, no uniform. He puts it together quickly. This is the class placement test. Students are out hunting for magical beads, and Fania wants Class A. He also knows from the game that she's going to struggle to find one on her own, so he offers to help. Fania immediately suspects a trap. Ed stays calm and gives her something simple. If he's lying, she can have him expelled on the spot. She has nothing to lose by listening. He tells her exactly where the third bead is, under Marilda's guardian tree, in the middle of the island. She goes. She finds it, exactly where he said it would be. That unsettles her more than anything else. 3 days ago, Ed was a cheater caught red-handed. Now he's handing her accurate information with no apparent angle. She doesn't know what to do with that. The next day, the placement results come in. Professor Glass collects the beads and makes quick work of the students who came back with the wrong items, magical eggs and the like. Class F, no discussion. He explains that the real beads carry no magical signature, which is precisely what made them hard to find. 2 were recovered by Jix and Lortel, the story's main protagonists. Then Glast points to the student who retrieved the third, the one from the guardian tree, and names them top of the class. Meanwhile, Ed is back by the river building a fishing rod from scratch. Another achievement unlocked. And while he works, he thinks through what he actually just did. Fania's ability to read people didn't come from nowhere. She grew up surrounded by flattery and manipulation, and she got so good at cutting through it that eventually no one could fool her. That same skill, though, made her life lonelier. In the original game, she fails the placement test, grinds through the consequences, and earns the title Princess of Love through sheer effort and integrity. Not status, not shortcuts. Ed knew all of this. He also knew that telling her where the bead was would technically help her pass, but would quietly destroy the story he's depending on. If the timeline shifts too far, everything he knows about the game stops being useful. His entire edge disappears. But here's the thing. The information was never really a gift. It was a move. Fania is hiding her royal identity because she doesn't want special treatment. She wants to earn her place, and that's exactly why she couldn't take the bead. Accepting it would mean her result wasn't really hers. It would compromise every everything she stands for. Ed knew she'd refuse. Since he can't lie to her, he found a way to tell the truth and still get the outcome he needed. He pointed her at the bead. She walked away from it on principle, and another student named Lucy picked it up instead. Fina is furious. She knows Ed didn't deceive her, which means she has no grounds to act against him. He played it clean, technically. That almost makes it worse. Ed, for his part, is satisfied. He kept his place at the academy, kept the story intact, and managed to do it without telling a single lie. Not bad for someone who was almost expelled over breakfast. Back at the academy for the opening ceremony, Ed is noticeably more relaxed, eating, settling in, acting like someone who actually wants to be there. The students around him pick up on it immediately, because the Ed they remember was a bully and a problem. This version doesn't match that file at all. He's not performing the change either. His goal is simple: graduate. Everything else is noise. One student in particular can't stop watching him. She's not sure what to make of it. He looks like the same person, but reads like someone completely different. Then, on his first day back, Ed gets summoned to the principal's office. His mind goes straight to expulsion. It doesn't. The principal is calm, almost warm, and the meeting turns out to be nothing serious. Ed's first instinct is that Fina reported him, but the principal's tone makes it clear she doesn't know a thing. That's a relief, but it's also a reminder. He decides then to stop improvising and stay as close to the original story as possible. Out in the forest, Ed keeps grinding. His survival skills sharpen, his arrows get better, and he starts thinking seriously about enchanting them with magic. One evening, heading back to his tent after hunting, he spots a girl sitting under the Marilda tree. It's the same girl from the ceremony, Janica Failover, second-year genius spirit sorcerer, same year as Ed. She lights up when she sees him and comes straight over. She introduces herself and mentions that the Marilda tree itself has been telling her about him. Apparently the tree has been watching Ed move through the forest and has no issue with him being there. That's oddly reassuring. Ed takes it in stride, noting that even a wild wolf can have a gentle side. Janica laughs at that. Then she holds out her hand and offers to let him touch the spirit she's contracted with. Ed passes. He tells her he can't see anything in her hand, keeps it polite, and says he only came out here for food. Then he leaves. The real reason he's keeping his distance is that Janica matters a lot in the original story. Getting close to her risks changing things he can't afford to change. His edge in navigating this world depends on the story going the way he knows it will. Behind him, Janica calls over her spirit companion, a wild wolf named Marilda, guardian of the forest. She leans against it and thinks out loud. Ed is exactly as interesting as Marilda described. He barely gives her more than one-word answers, but somehow that makes her more curious, not less. She's already decided this isn't their last meeting. The next morning, Ed is in a full sprint to not be late. His shelter is nowhere near campus, so every morning is a small logistical problem. But the effort is paying off. His stats keep climbing. He handles everything himself. Chores, laundry, rationing supplies. The scholarship isn't optional. It's the plan. Janica, meanwhile, has apparently made watching him part of her morning routine. When Ed finally clocks her, he stops and demands to know why she keeps following him. He reminds her, with full seriousness, exactly who she's dealing with. Ed Roth Taylor, the most dangerous, most notorious person at the academy. Ed tries to keep Janica at arm's length, but she makes it difficult. She tells him she doesn't form opinions based on what other people say. She'd rather judge him for herself. It's a reasonable position. Ed just can't afford to take it seriously, because he knows something she doesn't. Janica isn't just a friendly face. She's the final boss of Act 1, and no matter how warm she seems right now, getting close to her is a risk he's not willing to take. Still, the pressure of his situation eventually wins out, and Ed breaks his own rule. He asks her for a favor. Janica lights up, clearly expecting something meaningful. Then he asks for money, and the warmth drains right out of her face. This is Janica's one real vulnerability, and Ed knew it going in. She comes from nothing, and her scholarship is the only thing keeping her at the academy. Asking her for money wasn't just awkward. It was asking her to give up something she can't spare. She apologizes quietly and walks away, and Ed is left with the particular discomfort of being technically right and still feeling like he did something wrong. 3 days later, out hunting, he's still thinking about it. He regrets the ask, but the logic holds. The further he stays from the key characters, the safer the original storyline is. That's the priority. He has to keep reminding himself of that. Then he gets back to his tent, lifts the curtain, and finds Lucy Marcel asleep inside. Lucy Marcel, rare genius, most powerful mage at the academy, and apparently someone who treats other people's campsites as a personal napping spot. She wakes up and immediately complains that he's being too loud. When Ed demands an explanation, Lucy just points behind him. Calm as anything, she tells him a spirit is trying to reach him, one that wants him to save Janica no matter what. Ed turns around and sees absolutely nothing. He's frustrated, ousted from his own tent by someone who walked in uninvited and is now delivering cryptic messages on behalf of entities only she can perceive. And the problem doesn't stop there. Lucy, it turns out, has been using his camp as a regular retreat, somewhere to skip class, eat his supplies, and sleep undisturbed. She ignores everything he says. She takes the bait right off his snare traps and eats it without a second thought. There's no reasoning with her, no leverage, And as a player, he knows there's no recorded strategy for dealing with her in combat either. So Ed goes looking for a different angle. He digs through his memory of the game guides, the obscure details most players skim past, and finds exactly what he needs. He mentions casually that he spotted maids from Ophelos Hall looking for her. Lucy goes completely still. Then she remembers something urgent, makes a vague excuse, and disappears into the air. Just like that, Ed exhales. It turns out that Lucy Marcel, undefeated mage, has exactly one weakness: the dormitory maids assigned to look after her. She runs from them every time. It's not in any combat guide, it's buried in the lore, and Ed is quietly very pleased with himself for knowing it. He's confident her brief stay won't have shifted the story in any meaningful way. He got rid of her fast enough. The original timeline is intact, though he does notice with some mild concern that outmaneuvering these situations is starting to feel a little satisfying. He doesn't have long to sit with that thought. The first major quest arrives: Joint Combat Training. It's a mock one-on-one exercise with reduced lethality weapons. And more importantly, it's the moment the game's main cast all end up in the same place for the first time, including Taylor, the failing swordsman, the one the whole story is actually built around. Ed already knows how it plays out. The first-year main characters win their matches, Taylor wins his. None of it surprises him. He watches with the detached calm of someone who's already seen the ending, until he spots Janica. Janica shows up again with the same energy as always, completely unbothered by the fact that Ed has been trying to shake her off for days. Watching her refuse to take a hint, Ed privately wonders if she belongs to some dog family, the same way Lucy belongs to a cat one. The wandering, the clinging, it tracks. She means well, so she shows him the match list. Ed doesn't bother looking at it until she mentions his name is on it. Then he grabs it. The problem is that in the original story, Ed Roth Taylor gets expelled before this quest ever happens. He was never supposed to be here at all. He scans the list fast, looking for his opponent, but before he can fully process it, the main event starts. Taylor versus Lucy Marcel. Ed sets the list down. Whatever else is going on, he's not missing this. He spent hundreds of hours playing through this game with Taylor as his protagonist. Inhabiting a side character's body doesn't change that. The attachment is still there, and he wants to see the moment play out the way he remembers it. Taylor reading Lucy's spells, catching her off guard, and becoming the first person to ever beat her. Lucy overreaches with intermediate lightning magic, gets disqualified for it, and Taylor walks away with the win. Ed knows every beat of it. The bell rings. Taylor charges in exactly like he's supposed to. Lucy drops him with one lightning strike. Ed isn't worried. This is all part of it. Taylor gets back up, grabs his sword, and rushes her again. Right on script. Ed leans in. Then Lucy doesn't cast the intermediate lightning spell. She throws up a block, stops Taylor cold, and follows it with wind magic that sends him across the arena and leaves him completely spent. The announcer calls it. Lucy wins. Ed just stares. That wasn't supposed to happen. Taylor losing this fight isn't a minor deviation. This match is a turning point in the entire story, and it just went the wrong way. The crowd cheers. Taylor walks off the floor, gutted, and Ed's mind is already moving because something about what Lucy just did doesn't add up. Continuous magic. That's not a skill Lucy is supposed to have at this point in the story. The only way to use it is through a contract with a high-class spirit. And in the original timeline, Lucy has no connection to Marilda, the forest guardian spirit, whatsoever. Except Ed knows exactly when that changed. Lucy wandered into his campsite. She must have crossed paths with Marilda there, and somehow a contract formed. Because of him, Lucy is stronger than she was ever meant to be. He barely has time to sit with that before the announcer calls the next match. Ed Roth Taylor versus Princess Fina. The princess is already ready, clearly looking forward to this. Ed doesn't even look at her. He steps past her and walks after Taylor. Taylor's loss is on him. Ed was never supposed to be at this academy during this quest, and his presence has already bent the story out of shape. If Taylor's arc breaks, everything downstream breaks with it. That's the only thing that matters right now. Ed catches up to Taylor and makes his case. Don't quit. You're stronger than this. The academy needs you. It's a genuine pep talk, but Ed's motivations aren't entirely selfless. If Taylor walks away from the story, Ed's own chances of surviving this game get a lot worse. He's rooting for Taylor, yes. He's also rooting for himself. Meanwhile, there's something worth understanding about Princess Fina. Her judgment ability didn't come from divine favor. She built it herself, piece by piece, surviving the political minefield of the imperial family. Years of watching people lie to her face will sharpen anyone's instincts. It's less a gift and more a scar that turned useful, and because she earned it the hard way, she trusts it completely, which is exactly why Ed is a problem for her. Before the match, they exchange pleasantries. He tells her to go easy on him, she says the same. The crowd, meanwhile, has already made up their minds about Ed. In the original story, he bullied Taylor and then turned around and cheered for him, which reads as exactly as hollow as it sounds. Ed doesn't argue the point. He knows the character he's inhabiting, and the reputation fits. Then the match starts. Fina opens with a water ball. A test, really. She expects him to dodge, maybe counter with fire or wind, Instead, Ed just stands there and takes it. Then he quietly concedes the match and walks off. The crowd goes wild for Fenya and absolutely buries Ed, calling him worse than Taylor. He thanks her for the duel and leaves without a word. The forfeit is deliberate. Fenya matters to the story, and Ed has no interest in disrupting her arc. He's already moving on looking for Taylor, because in his mind, Taylor is the one who actually needs to be protected right now. But Fenya doesn't let it go. She follows him out of the arena alone, no escort, slightly out of breath, and confronts him directly. She wants to know what he's actually doing. She saw that he had no intention of winning, that he just wanted off that stage as fast as possible, and she can't make sense of it. The frustration spills over into something more personal. She's exhausted by her classmates, the professors, the servants, all of it. Ed's behavior is just the latest thing she can't read, and it's getting to her. Ed steps closer, puts his hands on her shoulders, and tells her to calm down. The breathing exercise works. Fenya's frustration slowly drains out of her, and once she's calm enough to notice how she'd been acting, she apologizes to Ed. Ed clocks that she's settled down and starts looking for an exit. He still needs to find Taylor, but Fenya isn't done. She opens up about life in the royal palace. The constant politics, the scheming, the weight of never being able to just exist without calculating every move. It's clearly been grinding her down for a long time. Even after getting that off her chest, she circles back to Ed. She wants to know why he targeted Taylor, and her theory is sharper than he'd like. She wonders if Taylor's troubled background made him a convenient target, someone Ed could use to get himself disowned from his own family. She's not entirely wrong. Ed knows it. He pretends otherwise. It's not the right moment to explain, and explaining would only make things messier, so he keeps his answers vague and his expression unreadable. That works about as well as expected. Fenya pushes harder. She wants to know how someone who bullied Taylor and tried to get him expelled is now apparently in his corner. Ed keeps dodging. She gets angrier, but without anything concrete to pin on him, she lets him go, suspicious and unsatisfied. Then, at the door, Ed pauses and turns back. He tells her that yes, she needs to navigate the politics, but she also needs to rest. The academy isn't the palace. She doesn't have to be on guard every second of every day. Fenya doesn't quite know what to do with that. No one at the academy, or anywhere really, has looked at her clearly enough to say something like that. It catches her off guard, and it stays with her after he's gone. Ed knows those words probably landed harder than intended. He doesn't linger on it. He keeps moving, hoping he hasn't already missed Taylor. He hasn't. He finds Taylor sitting alone, broken sword in hand, the picture of someone trying to figure out what comes next. Before Ed can get close, someone steps in front of him. Isla Triss, the main heroine of the game, puts herself between them and makes it plain that Taylor doesn't need any more of whatever Ed is bringing. Then Taylor stands up. Despite everything, the loss, the broken sword, the public humiliation, he gets to his feet and faces Ed directly, demanding to know why Ed is still at the academy at all. Ed isn't entirely surprised. He's played through Taylor's story enough times to know that this is exactly who Taylor is. No matter how badly a fight goes, he gets back up. And standing next to him is Isla, Taylor's childhood friend, and the person who's always been the reason he does. So instead of deflecting, Ed does something simple. He compliments Taylor's swordsmanship, genuinely. He's fought alongside Taylor through the entire game. He knows exactly how good Taylor is, and he means it. Then he tells them he just came to check on Taylor. No schemes, no agenda. He turns and walks away. Taylor and Isla watch him go, clearly annoyed by how unbothered he seems. From where they're standing, it probably looks like he's trying to be cool about it. Ed doesn't correct that impression. He's barely out the door when a massive explosion shakes the hall behind him. Ed recognizes it immediately. In the game, this is the moment. The legendary duel between Lortel, the Golden Daughter, and Janica Failover. It's a set piece, a key event. And in the original story, Taylor and the other main characters were supposed to be inside watching it unfold. They're not inside anymore. Ed shifted that. But the duel is still happening, and Taylor and Isla are close enough to catch it from outside. The scene is off script, but the story is still moving. For now, that's enough. The duel itself is straightforward enough. Janica's fire spirit overwhelms Lortel's ice magic, and just like that, a second-year student takes the win. The crowd loves it. Janica doesn't. The moment she sees Lortel being carried off by medics, the guilt hits her. She'd slipped an intermediate-level spell into the fight, against the rules, and nobody caught it. Lucky for her. Not so easy to live with. The ripple effects go further than just that match. Unlike the original story, Lucy defeats Taylor, and the quest wraps up with Janica as the sole senior year winner. Ed watches it all and quietly notes that Janica's life is about to get a lot more complicated. Honestly, he considers that a good thing. A busy Janica is one less person showing up at his camp. That's the plan anyway. Stay out of it. No more entanglements with the main characters. 2 weeks after the joint combat training quest, Ed puts his head down and gets to work on himself. His stats climb. His body gets tougher. He's building towards something simple, the ability to study and survive without needing anyone else. Then Janica finds his camp anyway. He's bathing in the river when she sneaks up on him, which goes about as well as you'd expect. After the yelling dies down, they end up sitting by the campfire, and Janica tells him she likes the place, calls it a top-secret base, perfect for adventures. Then she says she needs his honest opinion on something. Ed asks why him. She has plenty of friends. That's exactly the problem, she says. After the duel, she can't stop thinking about what she did to Lortel. The illegal spell, the injury, the guilt that won't quiet down. Her friends would tell her she did the right thing. She doesn't want comfort. She wants the truth. Ed gives it to her plainly. If she thinks she should apologize, she should apologize. Feeling bad doesn't undo anything, and neither does having people take her side. The mistake already happened. Janica smiles at that, genuinely. She tells him it's a relief to hear someone just say it straight. Then she gets a little more thoughtful and mentions she's noticed how different Ed seems from last year. She remembers the time he asked her for money. Most people in that position would have been visibly desperate. Ed wasn't. Something in how he carried himself told her to keep her distance, and she'd found that quietly fascinating ever since. She tells him she likes him, that she wishes more people were like him. For Ed, it's a strange thing to hear, but not unwelcome. The next morning, the universe reminds him why he doesn't get comfortable. Lortel is following him around the academy. He ignores her. She keeps going. He knows exactly what this is. The Failed Swordsman of Sylvania is the kind of game most players never finish. Bad endings come early and often. Wrong choices, failed saves, heroes broken or killed before the story can reach its real shape. Lortel is part of that architecture. In the early game, she reads as a villain, and most players treat her that way. Her actual role only becomes clear much later, and by then it's usually too late. Ed isn't most players. He knows what she is, and he knows what following her lead could cost him. So he makes a decision. Don't play along, don't get pulled in, and watch every step carefully from here. Lortel tries a different approach. She steps directly into Ed's path, smiles like she's never had a bad thought in her life, and asks for 2 hours of his time. Ed wants to know how long she's planning to keep this up. She tells him with a hint of mock surprise that she didn't think he'd hold out this long. Here's what makes that persistence worth noting. Lortel isn't just a persistent classmate. She's the only daughter of Ketchuln, one of the magnate elite, and she's already deep in the political war with Princess Fina over control of the academy. She has every reason to be recruiting, and every resource to do it with. Ed has no interest in becoming one of those resources. He starts walking again. Lortel keeps pace, switching to flattery, telling him she admires him despite what people say. Then she produces 3 gold coins, a full month's earnings for most students, and calls it a down payment. Her ask, become friends with Janica. She slides the coins into his pocket with a smile and frames it simply. More people on her side is always useful. Ed looks at her for a moment, then asks with genuine curiosity whether the famous golden daughter actually purchases her friendships. It's not an insult. It's almost a compliment, and he means it. For a first year, Lortel is already thinking several moves ahead, mapping alliances, building influence. Ed finds that genuinely impressive. He extends his hand. During the handshake, he offers her something in return. Not money, a lesson. He tells her that people who've always had wealth can be shattered by even a brief taste of poverty. But people who are truly desperate will trade almost anything for even a little relief. Their pride, their loyalty, sometimes themselves. Exploiting that desperation is easy and common. He is not desperate, and he's not interested. He takes the coins back out of his pocket, places them in her palm, and walks away. Lortel watches him go, somewhere between stunned and entertained. Ed, for his part, is annoyed at himself. The money would have helped, but changing the story's shape isn't a risk he can take. That night, Janica shows up at Lortel's quarters. Lortel greets her with a playful edge, saying she hadn't expected a visit. It's the first time they've spoken since their duel, and Janica opens by apologizing. She used an intermediate-level spell during the joint combat exercise, which broke the rules, even if unintentionally. She also notices Lortel's injuries are still visible and says so. Lortel waves it off. She'll heal. Then Janica, with a grin that suggests she already knows the answer, asks how the conversation with Ed went. Lortel tries to play dumb. Janica doesn't let her. She mentions, almost casually, that her spirits tend to eavesdrop. She doesn't usually encourage it, but they do what they like. Lortel goes quiet. Janica leans in, and with the full weight of seniority behind her, calls out exactly what Lortel was doing, using gold coins to manufacture loyalty. She makes it clear that real bonds don't work that way. Then, to twist the knife just slightly, she brings up Ed's response and frames it as something far more genuine than anything Lortel tried. Janica laughs at herself almost immediately after. She's aware she went a little overboard with the senior authority routine. Maybe she bragged just a touch too much. On her way out, Janica pauses to apologize once more for the rough training session, then adds that she's determined to reach the level where she can summon a high-tier spirit herself. She just needs to keep pushing. Lortel watches her go and turns it over in her mind. she's starting to see Janica more clearly. The cheerfulness isn't a front exactly, but it's armor, a way of moving through a world that isn't particularly kind without letting it show. And yet something about Janica right now feels off, like she's carrying something she hasn't put down yet. Meanwhile, Ed is back at camp doing laundry when a sudden gust scatters everything. The culprit is Belle Maya, senior maid of Sylvania's Awfulest dormitory, the same woman who once threw him out. She takes in his current setup and, to her own apparent surprise, admits she's pleased with what she sees. That's high praise from someone whose dormitory holds perfection as a baseline standard in everything from cooking to cleaning. Ed barely hears it. His eyes have gone straight to the basket in her hands, packed with premium ingredients she pulled from the forest herself. Belle notices him staring and tells him not to be shy about asking. So he asks for the basket, directly, no preamble, and she hands it over. He puts it to work immediately, crafting tools, preparing food, building out his supplies. By sunset, he's sitting with the results of a genuinely productive day, and for a moment things are quiet. That moment ends when something falls out of the sky and takes his entire tent with it. It's Lucy. Ed is furious in the specific way a person gets when they've almost died, and also lost something they built with their own hands. He demands to know what happened, and Lucy explains. Belle Maya had been in a mood, caught her skipping class that morning, and Lucy panicked and teleported to the first safe place that came to mind. His camp paid the price. She shows no particular guilt about this. Instead, she asks if he has any beef jerky. Ed smacks her on the head. What surprises him is that she doesn't block it. No reflex, no spell, nothing. Lucy admits she's completely out of magic, which means for once she has no leverage whatsoever. Ed decides to make the most of it and gives her a proper lecture, both for the camp and the skipped classes. Later, he's at the library, working through books on construction, real wood frame building, structural planning, surface finishing, roofing. He's thorough about it. So thorough that he nearly misses closing time, and is still packing up when a girl approaches and comments warmly on how seriously he's been studying. Ed assumes she's a librarian apprentice and apologizes for staying late. She waves it off and says watching someone that focused actually makes her want to work harder. She introduces herself as Elka Iceland, first year in the Faculty of Magic. Then Ed gives his name, and she goes still for just a second. He's used to that reaction. His character's reputation tends to arrive before he does. But Elka recovers quickly and says he seems nothing like what she's heard. She's genuinely impressed that he worked through advanced elemental studies texts at all, let alone at that pace. Before she heads back to her dorm, she tells him she'll be rooting for him and wishes him a safe walk home. It's a small thing, but Ed takes it. Then the floor shakes. Books cascade off shelves in every direction, burying both of them in the chaos. Something has just happened, something big enough to mark the end of Episode 1's final chapter. Across campus, students are already moving toward a temporary emergency camp under Taylor, the main character. Among them, Ayla stops, looks at the scale of what's unfolding, and finds herself reaching back for something she once read in a spirit book. Ayla's knowledge cuts right to the heart of it. The chaos isn't random. It's a summoning ritual for Glaskin, the highest-ranked dark spirit. And the one behind it is Janica Failover, a student who apparently had a strong enough connection to spirits to attempt something this dangerous, except she's no longer in control. The dark spirit has taken her over completely, making her the final boss of Act 1. Fenya grasps what that means for the camp. The barriers won't hold forever, and time is already running out. Taylor pushes everyone toward the student center, making it plain that if Glaskin fully manifests, people will die. The Royal Guard captain tries to keep the mood steady, telling students that faculty and expert mages will step in soon. Then Elvira Aniston, from the alchemy faculty, cuts through that optimism immediately. Principal Obel is out of town. The dark spirit isn't going to wait. Someone needs to act now. She calls for volunteers, and the room goes quiet. Klebius, a combat department student who knows exactly what's inside that building, wants no part of it. He lays out the situation plainly. Intermediate spirits are already guarding the building, and 2 high-ranked spirits, Tarkin and Velocifer, are in there too. Walking in isn't brave, it's just dying faster. Elvira can't quite wrap her head around how a student managed to pull this off in the first place. Isla fills in the gap. Dark spirits are natural enemies of spirit sorcerers. Their power tends to outrun even skilled handlers. Janica likely lost her grip the moment things escalated, and now Tarkin and Velocifer are using her abilities to bring Glaskin through. Who's actually directing them, though, remains an open question. While the debate drags on, Jix cuts it short. He points out that every second spent arguing is a second wasted, and that Fenya is the only one who can actually make the call. Everyone looks to her. Fenya takes a moment, and Ed's earlier words about the weight she carries seem to sit with her as she thinks. Then she gives the order. Top students from each year, plus the Royal Guards. 1 hour to prepare. They go in, free Janica, and shut down the summoning before Glaskin arrives. She takes full responsibility for whatever happens. Then a student runs up, breathless. The teaching area residents can't help him. They're already holding the line at Audrey Hall, protecting the potion archives. Fenya asks if there's anyone else. Before she gets an answer, another student reaches her, a frightened girl, trembling. There's an emergency in the library. Elka, the librarian apprentice, is trapped inside, along with a sophomore student. Jix doesn't wait for context. He grabs the girl by the shoulders and demands to know if Elka is still in there. When she confirms it, he's already decided. Elka can't defend herself, and he's going to get her out. Fenya stops him. Janica and the dark spirits are the priority, and Elka may not be alone. There's a sophomore with her. Jix isn't reassured. He doesn't know this student, and he's not about to trust a stranger with his best friend's life. Fenya asks the girl who the sophomore is. The girl freezes, visibly struggling to get the words out. Jix pushes her. Finally, in a shaky voice, she says the name, Ed Roth Taylor. The room goes still. Then the girl starts crying, apologizing through tears. She'd left early because Ed was staying late, and his presence had gotten on her nerves, so she left Elka to handle it. That's the whole story. Jix's worry turns into something sharper. Ed's reputation is not the kind that makes people feel better in a crisis, and the idea of leaving Elka alone with him, in a collapsing library no less, is not something he's willing to accept quietly. Fenya's suggestion, just trust Ed, relax, lands like a joke nobody was ready for. Everyone freezes. Jix does not find it funny. He's already moving. He launches into the air, cutting through dark spirits on his way to the library, screaming Ed's name. To understand why he's this worked up, you need to know where Jix comes from. He grew up alone on the northern prairies. No family, no memories of one. He survived by scavenging off corpses and selling deer meat. People kept their distance from him, and honestly, that was probably mutual. What changed everything was Elka. She was his first real friend, and her family pulled him out of that life and into something resembling civilization. So when Jix says he'd do anything to protect her, that's not an exaggeration. That's his entire biography. He smashes through the library doors and finds Ed, not threatening anyone, not doing anything sinister. Just slumped against a wall, covered in blood, barely able to move. Jix grabs him and demands to know where Elka is. Ed, too exhausted to argue, just points. Jix shoves him aside and runs. He finds Elka asleep on a shelf, unharmed. The relief is immediate, but then he starts noticing the details. Barricaded bookcases around her, a blood-stained coat draped over her, a board with written instructions nearby. The blood isn't hers. Someone set all of this up, fought off whatever came through that library, and stayed to guard her while doing it. That someone was Ed. We see it play out. Ed hauling heavy bookshelves, building a barrier around the unconscious Elka, writing out instructions in case someone else found her first, then just staying. At one point, he spots the summoning rune through the window and deliberately closes the curtain. Whatever's happening out there with the major players, he's decided it's not his problem tonight. He's got enough going on. Fighting off the dark spirits that come for Elka costs him, but it also gives him something back. His stats tick upward. He even unlocks a few spirit connection abilities, which surprises him more than anyone. When Jix carries Elka out and asks what happened in there, Ed tells him he was just training. Jix laughs. The kind of laugh that means he knows that's not the whole truth, but respects the answer anyway. He thanks Ed and promises to return the favor someday. Ed files that away, because he knows exactly who Jix is, Taylor's closest ally, and a crucial piece of what needs to happen next. So, before Jix leaves, Ed tells him to find Taylor and follow his lead. Jix is surprised to hear Ed speak well of someone he barely interacts with, but Ed's reasons are practical. In the original game, Taylor only unlocks his slash element through a duel with Jix, specifically by cutting through Jix's magic. That moment is what makes Taylor capable of defeating Tarkin. Without it, the whole sequence falls apart. Jix takes the advice and heads out. Ed finally gets to sit down, and then it hits him. That duel between Taylor and Jix, the one that was supposed to happen before the Act 1 finale, hasn't happened yet. The friendship that was supposed to exist between them doesn't exist yet. Taylor hasn't learned the slash element. The timeline isn't just bending, it's breaking. Ed barely has time to sit with that thought before the scene shifts back to camp. Jix arrives with Elka, apologizing for being late. The team stops him before he can say anything else. It doesn't matter. They already tried to push through and they failed. The captain, the soldiers, several students, all injured, all pulled back. They don't have enough left to go at Tarkin again. The window is closing, and the one thing that could change the outcome hasn't happened yet. Ed shows up at camp and reads the room immediately. The ritual to summon Glaskin is nearly finished, and if no one moves now, the whole world goes with it. He knows getting involved means bending the storyline further out of shape, but letting everything burn isn't much of an alternative, so he makes the call. He's stepping in and he's taking point. The moment Ed Roth Taylor takes charge, the camp goes quiet. Everyone stares. Clebius breaks the silence by laughing. He thinks Ed is joking. Jix cuts him off and tells the group to actually listen. Ed lays it out. Janica is the real target, but she's being controlled by Philosopher, the darkness spirit. Tarkin, the fire spirit, is standing between them and her, and as they already found out the hard way, Tarkin's shell makes it nearly untouchable. The plan, split into two teams. One pulls Tarkin away, the other goes straight for Janica. Lortel pushes back. They barely survived the first encounter, and that was with luck on their side. She doesn't think they have what it takes to handle Tarkin a second time. Ed doesn't argue the risk. He just points out that removing Janica from the equation collapses Tarkin's power entirely. There's no cleaner path. Taylor volunteers for the bait team. Ed immediately redirects him to the combat group. Taylor's role in what comes next is too important to waste on a distraction. Ed slots himself, Lortel, and Klebius into the bait team. Neither of them takes this news well. While they're busy objecting, Princess Fenya steps in and settles it. She doesn't fully trust Ed, she says so plainly, but she trusts the plan. She divides the group herself. Taylor, Elvira, Jix, and Fenya go for Janica. Ed, Lortel, and Klebius draw Tarkin out. Her only order before they move is simple. Whatever happens, nobody dies. Ed's team reaches Nail Hall corridor and finds Tarkin waiting, looking exactly as dangerous as advertised. Ed reminds them of the plan. Klebius looks like he's reconsidering every decision that led him here. He talks himself into it. Their job is just distraction. The other team handles the hard part. He charges at Tarkin, lands the hit, gets its attention. Then he turns around to check in with the group. The group is gone. Klebius is alone. Tarkin is now very interested in him, and he runs. He's furious the entire time. From a safe distance, Ed watches Klebius sprint for his life and calmly tells Lortel to focus on her task. Lortel half jokes that they could just let Klebius go. Ed shuts that down. No one is getting hurt on his watch. He knows Klebius better than Klebius knows himself right now. The fear is real, but so is what's underneath it. With Tarkin occupied, Ed turns Lortel loose on her actual assignment. She positions herself outside the hall and starts building the spell. Her job is to carve an opening in the wall and land a decisive hit on Tarkin. While she works, she finds herself thinking about Ed. His reputation is rough, but the person standing next to her doesn't quite match it. She files that away and blows a massive hole through the wall, cracking open a direct path to Janica. Fenya and the others on the far side didn't see that coming. Ed had spotted Lortel's real capability early and held it back for exactly this moment. She knew it, and it mattered to her. The path is open. Lortel turns to face Tarkin, and right on cue, Klebius comes sprinting back toward them, yelling apologies and begging for backup. Tarkin still very much on his heels. Ed figures out fast that Tarkin's shell is the same problem it was before. Nothing gets through it without something serious behind it. He knows exactly what that something is, and he heads for the roof. Up there, he finds Lucy asleep. She's not supposed to be anywhere near this event, but the story has already drifted far enough from the original that Ed decides she's fair game. He opens a pouch of beef jerky and tosses a piece into her mouth to wake her up. Then he throws her directly at Tarkin and tells everyone to get down. Lucy, furious and very much awake, lets loose her high-rank ability, Divine Punishment. It shatters Tarkin's shell clean open. Ed doesn't wait. He charges in and lands the finishing blow while the spirit is exposed. Meanwhile, Janica has spent her whole life being someone else's symbol. Her parents, her teachers, her friends, everyone proud, everyone expecting. For her, it's just been weight. A lot of it going back to childhood. Those memories are still running through her head when the wall explodes and the subduing team comes through, but she doesn't look relieved. She smiles, and it's the wrong kind of smile entirely. Velasphere has her now. Outside, Ed is trying to stay focused. He knows the final act chapter closes before dawn, so time is the real enemy here. Lortel fills him in on Lucy's current status, somewhere nearby, rolling around, completely spent after breaking Tarkin's shell. Lortel's been throwing ice spears at the spirit herself, but it's holding on. Lucy's out of energy. Klebius is too busy being chased in circles to be useful. Ed accepts the math and decides he's handling this personally. He turns to Lortel and tells her he's putting his life in her hands. Lortel calls it a reckless gamble. Ed reframes it as an investment, specifically an investment in getting rid of the monster that's been making her life difficult. That lands. She smiles and tells him he's a lot cooler than the princess, who never misses a chance to act like royalty. High praise coming from her. She gets to work laying ice traps while Ed lines up his run at Tarkin. Then a massive dark spirit appears on top of the hall, Glaskin's right hand, making everything worse. Ed clocks it, figures Taylor's team must be deep in their own fight, and keeps moving. He trusts Lortel, that's the whole plan. Tarkin winds up for a fire blast aimed straight at Ed. Lortel hits the timing perfectly. Her traps cut off the attack and open a window. Ed slides in, channels his wind magic, and cuts straight through Tarkin's throat. The spirit goes down. Ed checks his stats and likes what he sees. His spirit magic has jumped significantly, and he's unlocked a spirit contract slot, something he genuinely didn't expect to walk away with. He looks over and spots Taylor already tearing through Glaskin's right-hand spirit like it's a minor inconvenience. Ed watches for a moment and has to admit it. The guy really does carry the protagonist energy. With Tarkin finished and Janica free from Velasphere's grip, the group finally gets to breathe. They made it through. Lortel laughs it off, saying she's known plenty of people who claimed they were putting everything on the line, and most of them folded. What amuses her is that Ed, even after a near-death situation, barely flinches. She shakes his hand again, and this time slides 3 gold coins into his palm as a quiet thank you. Before Ed can even register that, Taylor shows up. His hair has gone white from the power he burned through, and he's looking at Ed with something close to resentment. Ed notices anyway. Taylor in full swordsman form is genuinely hard not to admire. The protagonist energy is all there. Ed has his own complicated feelings about Taylor, but that doesn't change what happens next. Taylor bows, deeply, and thanks Ed for saving the academy, calling it a debt he intends to honor. It's sincere. Then Clebius, still a mess, starts sobbing and shouting that nobody should ever trust someone like Ed. The group shuts that down fast, and Clebius retreats to the background to grumble. Princess Phoenix steps forward last. She thanks Ed with the kind of grace that makes it land, and then offers him a seat on the student council. Ed declines, deflecting the credit to everyone else. Elvira immediately starts teasing him, and Jix immediately tells her to knock it off. Ed watches the whole exchange and smiles. Seeing them all together like this does something to him. He spent this whole time keeping his distance from the main cast, deliberately, carefully, and yet here they are, growing into exactly who they're supposed to be. Taylor hardening through every fight, Isla finding her footing beside him, Phinia stepping into her role as a monarch, each of them moving along their own arc, right on schedule. Ed slips away from the group and heads to the hall to check on Janica. He knows the story may have bent a little, but his job hasn't changed. Stay in the background, keep the protagonists on track, let them shine. He finds Janica tucked inside a chest in the wreckage, bruised and hiding. When he brings the question back to the group, why did Janica snap? Lortel has a theory. She'd been in Janica's room. The walls were covered in letters and posts, the floor stacked with gifts from people outside the academy, all of them expecting great things from her. Lortel thinks the weight of it made Janica obsessive, compelled to respond to every single person, to honor every expectation placed on her. That's the crack Velisfer found. The dark spirit used that pressure to pull Janica under and turn her into a vessel for summoning Glaskin. Ed starts working backward from there. During the joint combat training, Taylor was supposed to beat Lucy and build his reputation, but he lost. That loss made Janica the story. She was the senior who took down a first year, and suddenly everyone was watching her, waiting for her to keep proving it. He thinks about Lucy and Janica both forming spirit contracts. Lucy had time in the forest, real time, building a genuine bond. Janica didn't have that, and Ed knows why. He was in the forest. He shifted things without meaning to, and Janica paid for it. When he finds her, Janica tells him she feels forgotten. After everything that happened, after all of it, no one came looking. She thought they would. Ed sits with her and manages to get a small laugh out of her. She tells him she didn't expect him to find her this fast. She just wanted a little more time to herself before she completely fell apart. That gets to him. Ed tears up too. He thinks back to Marilda, the spirit wolf, telling him to save Janica someday. He understands now what that meant. Not the battle. This. Everyone else in Janica's life has been a source of pressure, expectations, gratitude, performance. Ed kept his distance, and somehow that made him the one person she didn't feel she had to perform for. The rest of it comes into focus too. Janica rushed a contract with a high-rank spirit because she felt she had to. She was studying every night, replying to every letter, holding herself together for everyone watching. And when she finally reached for something beyond her, it broke. Velisfer was waiting right there. She met every expectation from the outside. Inside, she was barely holding on. Ed looks at her, someone who worked that hard and still ended up here, and finds it both painful and quietly beautiful. He tells her she worked hard, just that, and he means it. Outside, the other main characters are being celebrated. Inside the hall, it's just Ed and Janica, and his words finally break through. She starts crying. Then something Ed didn't expect. Every one of Janica's spirit companions materializes in the hall around them. He's watched this scene play out countless times in the story, and he has never seen them before, not once. Seeing them now tells him something has shifted. He's not just observing anymore, he's actually inside the moment. The game registers it too. Ed's stats climb and he hits level 10, which unlocks the ability to see spirit animals seeking a bond. The high-rank spirit wolf, the one that's been circling his story from the beginning, makes its interest known. They form a contract. 10 days later, Janica stands before her disciplinary committee. She owns her mistakes and says she'll take whatever punishment comes. But she doesn't have to stand there alone. Her friends, her teachers, and even the main characters all show up to push back. The argument is straightforward. A dark spirit philosopher overpowered her. There was no intent. Even Lortel gets involved, personally covering the cost of the destroyed building. Her only ask in return is a small reduction in custom fees on school supplies, which, for Lortel, is basically charity. The committee had originally lined up the full package, benefits stripped, achievements wiped, expulsion. Under the weight of everyone standing behind her, they walk it back. Janica keeps her place at the academy, with probation and a suspension in place of everything else. Her friends are relieved, but they can tell something is still sitting heavy on her, so they put together a tea party and quietly agree to keep the whole incident off the table. Then, mid-party, completely out of nowhere, Janica asks what the difference is between loving someone and just liking them. Her two best friends, Anna and Sinclaira, go very still. They ask, carefully, where this is coming from. Janica tells them she's been having the same dream on repeat. A garden, flowers, herself looking like something out of a storybook, holding a crown she made for a friend. The friend arrives on horseback. She places the crown on his head, and they spend the afternoon together. Every time, exactly the same. She's smiling just describing it. Anna and Sinclaira immediately recognize the danger. This is the edge of Janica's actual feelings, and one wrong step could pull the whole thing into the open. Anna Sinclaira panics, invents an urgent errand involving a professor, and is gone before anyone can stop her. That leaves Sinclaira, or rather Clara, alone with Janica and the situation. She knows what's at stake. If this conversation goes sideways, Janica's private life becomes campus gossip by morning. Clara keeps her composure. She tells Janica gently that feelings don't always come with clear labels, and that the honest move is to sit with them rather than force an answer. She also nudges Janica to be careful about who she shares this kind of thing with, for her own sake and for her friends. Janica takes it in, thanks her sincerely, and says it's exactly the kind of advice she'd expect from her. Then she excuses herself, citing a report she needs to file at Ophilus Hall. Clara waves her off with a smile. The moment Janica is out of sight, she drops her head straight onto the table. Crisis managed. For now. Meanwhile, Ed has been quietly saving every coin he can, helped along by a petition from the princess, and he's finally building a real house. When he gets to the construction site, he spots Janica nearby. He figures it's fine. The first act is over, which means running into her shouldn't pull anything off course. He moves to approach her. Janica sees him coming and immediately steps behind a tree. Ed stops, genuinely puzzled. Somewhere in her head, Clara's advice about honesty is running on a loop, but it's not quite loud enough. Janica announces she has things to handle at Ophilus Hall and walks away at a pace that is technically not running. Confessing her feelings is, for Janica, basically an unsolvable problem. Ed, for his part, decides not to lose sleep over her strange behavior. He has a house to build. Day 1, he picks the right spot. Day 2, the logs start falling. His semester results come back around the same time, and they're well above average, which tracks given everything else he's quietly been doing. Back at the academy, though, the Janica situation refuses to resolve itself. She ducks behind walls when she sees him. Her friends Clara and Annis have apparently decided Ed is the problem, shooting him looks that make their position clear. He remains confused. They remain furious. Nobody talks to each other. Meanwhile, the hut takes shape. 45 days of cutting lumber, failed wall structures, a Lucy-related beef jerky incident, Belmaya's questionable assistance, and slow, steady modifications to walls and furniture. On day 45, it's done. Ed unlocks a personal achievement for building something from scratch, and more importantly, he finally has a roof over his head that he owns. He's resting inside when Janica appears at the tree line, watching quietly from the forest. She doesn't come in yet. She just looks. After Ed finishes the last details, flooring, fireplace, firewood storage, he steps back to take it all in. Then he notices Lucy asleep on the roof, which is less surprising than it probably should be. And then Janica steps out and greets him like she didn't just spend weeks hiding from him. He asks, reasonably, how she found a remote campsite in the middle of the forest. She tells him a maid described the hut as a masterpiece, and she had to see it herself. She wanders around it, saying exactly that, out loud, more than once. Ed asks if the spirits tipped her off, given how new the place is. Janica goes a little red. She admits they did mention it, but apparently the spirits were less focused on the hut and more focused on how Ed looked while building it. She laughs it off and says she just wanted to check on him. Ed smiles and invites her in. She follows, still blushing, and immediately forgets to be awkward once she sees the inside. Sitting by the fireplace, she opens up, grateful for everything Lortel and her friends have done, but already anxious about how to pay it back. Ed tells her not to carry that weight, especially when she can't afford to. He's seen where that road goes. The dark spirit incident wasn't random. It came from her taking on responsibility that wasn't hers to take. Moving to Ophilus Hall with 8 others won't break the cycle of envy and expectation on its own. He keeps that part gentle, but he means it. Before she leaves, he tells her she's welcome at the hut anytime, whenever she's lonely or needs somewhere to breathe. She smiles at that genuinely and tells him the same goes for her door. Ed smiles back, then quietly sighs at the word overwhelmed because he knows exactly what's coming. Second semester, Act 2. The Sage's sealed grimoire, a record of advanced, dangerous magic, is about to surface, and when it does, it'll threaten to consume the entire academy. He thanks Janica for the offer and keeps the rest to himself. His plan hasn't changed. Stay on the sidelines, let the main characters do what they're built for, and don't get pulled into the middle of it. Then Act 2 begins, on a dark and stormy night, as these things tend to. Ophilus Hall students return to campus in comfort. Carriages, boats, extended deadlines, no penalties for being late. The storm is practically an inconvenience for them. For Dex's Hall students, it's just the storm. Dex's Hall students have to make the trip back through the storm themselves, and if they're late, they lose points for it. The unfairness isn't subtle, and it doesn't go unnoticed. The students push back, gathering to demand that someone explain why they're being treated like a lower class of people. Behind that anger, though, two people are quietly working the situation. Lortel has her own agenda, and she's brought in a provocateur named Willen, someone with a talent for turning frustration into fire. The students want fairness. Willen wants a riot. Lortel actually puts forward a reasonable solution. Extend the deadline for storm-delayed students and formally acknowledge that Ophelos Hall gets preferential treatment. The headmaids and the review division back her on it. The administration doesn't budge. That silence is all the protest needs to escalate. The students move from demanding answers to planning destruction, targeting Ophelos Hall's hardwood furniture and artisan-crafted paintings, the kind of damage that's hard to ignore. Willen gets exactly what he came for. Chaos he can use to drag the Academy's name through the mud. And Lortel, operating through the Merchant Association, turns the Academy's crisis into leverage for her own goals that have been building since the Glaskin incident. While all of this unfolds, the Merchant Association spots a bigger opportunity. They move to sabotage the Sage's sealed grimoire, the book considered the very heart of Sylvania. Something so valuable that people have offered everything they have just to get near it. Lortel watches the rain from her window, and something in it pulls her back. She grew up in the slums, wandering those same dark streets in rags. The memory draws a bitter smile out of her. She catches herself feeling a flicker of relief and immediately turns it on herself. Her whole life has been survival, betrayal, suspicion, never letting anyone close enough to see something real. It's left marks. She knows what she looks like from the outside, but underneath all of it, she wants someone to see past that, someone who recognizes the life she came from. She decides to find people like her, others who know what it means to grow up with nothing. Ed has a name for her, the Black Veil, always operating just out of sight, keeping the uglier truths hidden from view. It's what the players called her too. Outside, the protest is getting louder. In the original game storyline, this whole incident, the Ophelos Hall occupation, is Taylor's arc. He fights his way up through the hall floor by floor, taking on middle bosses who are helping the rioters from the inside. 5 floors, 5 fights. The first of those bosses is Tote, nicknamed the Decoy. Tote is a bitter, mouthy student who gets humiliated by Taylor's crew early on, and that humiliation is exactly what Lortel uses to buy his loyalty. His job in the incident is straightforward. Grab the maid guarding the first floor, then break open the front door of Ophelos Hall. Once the door is down, Willen has his opening to lead the rioters inside. After that, Tote's role is to slow Taylor down at the entrance, buying time for the rioters to push up toward the 4th floor and declare control of the building. Except when Willen reaches the upper floors and turns to check on his inside man, it isn't Tote standing there. It's Ed Roth Taylor. The original script has been rewritten, and nobody told the rioters. Ed walks us back to how he ended up here. 2 days before the incident, he was out in the woods struggling to hunt with a bow. No combat skills, no natural feel for it, just pain and persistence. His camp has become a regular stop for a few people now that word's gotten out he's living there, 3 visitors in particular. Lucy shows up with questions he usually can't answer. Janica shows up with food, laundry tips, and genuine help. And when Ed thanks her for it, she goes red and starts acting strange. He finds her easy to read, which he seems to appreciate. She's less comfortable when Lucy comes around. And then there's Lortel. She visits at night. Lortel's visits aren't social calls. Ed figures out quickly that she's building a network, people she can use when she makes her move on Ophelos Hall. One night, she lays it out for him. She wants his help taking the place down from the inside. Ed's first instinct is to stay out of it. His whole strategy depends on the story running its natural course, and interfering feels like poking a machine he doesn't fully understand. But then Lortel mentions that Tote collapsed after a run-in with Taylor, and that gets his attention. In the original story, Tote was supposed to lose that fight. Badly, but predictably. What actually happened was messier. Tote made the mistake of insulting Taylor by comparing him unfavorably to Ed Roth, which set Jix off in a way the script never accounted for. The beating went further than it was supposed to. Lortel smiles like she already knows she has him. She tells him she doesn't need much. Just steal the keys from a maid and open the hall door when the protesters show up. Ed runs the math. If those doors stay shut and Lortel's plan falls apart, Act 2 goes with it. He doesn't want in, but he wants the story to break even less. He tells her he'll help, but only on the edges. Nothing central, nothing that puts him in the middle of it. Lortel agrees, and throws in 20 gold coins to seal it. Ed accepts, mostly because he doesn't have a better option. Later, sitting by the fire, he turns the whole situation over in his head. The protest, the seized hall, the fight over Sage's sealed grimoire, Lortel's plan to gut the Academy's finances. It's a lot. Unsettling, but also, if he's honest, kind of impressive. The deeper conflict is between Lortel and Princess Fina. Lortel has formed a faction called Merchantry, a business-oriented bloc designed to go head-to-head with Fina's student association. The whole arc hinges on which side Taylor ends up choosing. Ed has zero interest in influencing that. He plans to read the room, back the winner late, and walk away intact. Before any of that plays out, Janica stops by his hut. Her suspension is almost over, and she's moving back to Dex's hall, so she comes to say thank you and drops off some things she doesn't need anymore. Cushions, pillows, the basics. Ed takes them without hesitation, which makes her happy. She notices Lucky sitting on the roof in the rain and asks about it. Ed knows the reason. Lucky has her own quiet ritual around rainy days, something tied to her past, but he just tells Janica not to worry about it. For some reason, that answer seems to mean something to her. Then he asks her for a favor. He knows the protest is coming, and he knows the hall's magical protection runes will lock everyone inside once things kick off. He doesn't want Janica anywhere near it. He asks her to meet him at the Rose Garden outside the hall at 9. Janica immediately decides this is a confession. She leaves flushed and waving, already somewhere else in her head. Ed watches her go, relieved. He just needed her out of the building. Meanwhile, Jix is in his room when he spots someone slipping around to the back of Ophelis Hall. It's Ed, being led in by a maid who tells him the rest of the staff are tied up trying to figure out how to handle the incoming crowd. She hands over what he asked for and leaves. Outside, Willen is rallying the protesters to break the door down. Before they get the chance, Ed opens it from the inside. Willen recognizes him as Lortel's contact, and when he sees the tied-up maid and hears Ed's cover story about being a former resident with a score to settle, he's genuinely moved. He apologizes for doubting him. Ed tells him to stop thanking him and get upstairs. There's work to do. He knows Willen is going to end up holding the bag for all of this, but it's in the script, and Ed didn't write it. Ed lets the maid go. He already knows Chief Maid Alice is on Lortel's side, and by the time anyone gets organized, it'll be too late to matter. Right on cue, Black Veil Lortel appears. She's moving fast. The Academy staff will shut this down soon, so whatever she came to do, she needs to do it now. Ed tells her to get on with it. He's not her hype man, but as she heads upstairs, she stops and asks him, almost casually, whether he's ever killed anyone. He hasn't. Lortel smiles and says she hasn't either, but she's done plenty of things that amount to the same. Ruined people, sold them out. That's how she became the Golden Daughter. She knows she doesn't deserve sympathy. She just keeps looking for it anyway, in people who might actually understand her. Ed doesn't give her what she's looking for. He tells her to own what she's done. Lortel takes that with her usual smile and heads upstairs to finish the job. Ed sits down on the floor and waits. Once the hall's magical defenses drain completely, Willain will absorb them and transform. 4th stage boss right on schedule. His part is done. Now it's Taylor's story. Ed has no interest in rewriting that. His job from here is simple. Play the minor villain, take the hits, keep the plot intact. Necessary work. Over at the Rose Garden, Janica is doing the opposite of keeping it together. She's been thinking about Ed for 3 days straight, barely sleeping, and now she's sitting alone on a bench waiting for him. She spots a golden carriage nearby and wonders vaguely whose it is. Then she finds Ed's note. He's running late. He'll be there soon. She immediately assumes he's planning something romantic and decides she'll wait as long as it takes. Then she notices her hairpin, the flower one. Is it the right choice? Would the Cosmos hairpin be better? She thinks about it long enough that the only logical conclusion, apparently, is to run back to her hall and swap it out. Marlita the Spirit Wolf already told her other girls have been visiting Ed's hut, which has been quietly eating at her, but none of that stops her from caring about the hairpin. Outside Ophelis Hall, Taylor arrives with Elvira and Isla. The open gate and the trail of footprints tell them everything. Elvira doesn't wait for a full briefing. The thought of her belongings getting touched is enough. She's already moving. Taylor and Isla go after her, less out of solidarity and more out of concern for whoever she might incinerate. They get through the door and find Ed Roth sitting calmly in the middle of the hall. Taylor asks the obvious question. He looks around at the state of the place, and the answer becomes clear before Ed even opens his mouth. Ed is here to block them. He says as much. Elvira steps up immediately, confident that her magic makes this a short conversation. Ed tells her she's still a rookie. She doesn't take that well. Taylor moves first. Ed redirects him with a wind spell, throwing rubble into his path, then cuts the chandelier loose from above. It comes down hard, clips the wall, and sends Taylor to the floor. Somewhere deeper in the hall, Klebia is sitting in a room by himself, flinching at every crash, convinced that whatever's happening out there is about to become his problem. Out in the hall, the three of them are struggling to get anywhere near Ed. His wind magic keeps cutting off their angles, and when Elvira tries to push forward, a wind blade passes close enough to stop her cold. The near miss costs her. Her bag hits the floor and her spells scatter, and the moment she turns to grab them, Ed walls off the whole pile with fire. Just like that, her inventory is gone. He's not reacting to the fight, he's directing it. Every spell placed, every position forced. Ed is running this like he already knows how it ends. Elvira, realizing she's been completely outmaneuvered, turns her frustration toward Jix. They were told Ed was manageable. They were wrong. And the more she thinks about it, the clearer it gets. Ed has figured out the Academy's core weakness. Students who train with tools and elixirs, but never develop actual combat instincts. Elvira can see it in herself. She dismissed rings and necklaces as inconvenient, leaned entirely on her spells, and walked in here confident. The chandelier, the firewall, the bag. Ed targeted exactly that overconfidence. Step by step, The top alchemy student of the first years is standing in a hallway with nothing to work with. Furious, she throws a spirit bead to the floor and summons a spirit rabbit. She coats it in a fire-resistant formula, and whatever the rabbit was before, it isn't that anymore. It's a weapon now. Across the hall, Ayla and Taylor are pinned behind Ed's firewalls. Ayla tries water magic to douse the flames, but the walls are laced with wind. Anyone who gets too close gets cut. Taylor keeps pulling her back, shielding her from the blades. Ayla knows her theory, and she can cast, but Ed's precision keeps them exactly where he wants them. Elvira calls out to Taylor, "Can he take Ed if he gets close?" She doesn't wait for an answer. She sends the rabbit in. The creature charges, and it's enough of a threat that Ed has to deal with it. Taylor uses the opening to push forward, and while both of them have Ed's attention, Elvira runs straight through the firewalls toward her scattered items. She takes hits, narrowly avoids spells, and gets there anyway, dropping to her knees and gathering her things with a relief she doesn't bother hiding. She's back in the fight, or so she thinks. Ed flings a wind blade at her while still managing the rabbit, and Elvira, confident now, closes her eyes and casts a release magic spell. It unravels every active spell Ed has running, reducing his magic to inert reagents and locking him out entirely. The rabbit dissolves. The firewalls drop. Ed has nothing left. He runs. Taylor goes after him up the stairs, and at the top, Ed kicks over a bucket of fire oil he'd left there. The flames spread fast, and for a moment the group hesitates. One hallway fire is manageable, but this could take the whole building. Taylor decides it doesn't matter. He uses an elemental slash to cut through the flames and keeps moving. Behind him, Elvira stops. She's looking at the hall, the carpets are gone, and every window is open. Ed set this up, not to trap them, but to contain the damage. He made sure the fire couldn't spread. She opens her mouth to call out to Taylor. Too late. Taylor reaches Ed. Ed raises his bow and shoots past him entirely, the arrow aimed straight at Ayla. The arrow wasn't aimed to kill, it was aimed to distract. Elvira catches it mid-flight and immediately clocks what's wrong. The tip is wrapped in cloth. This wasn't an attack, it was a signal. She shouts a warning to Taylor, but he's already committed. He reaches Ed and swings. Ed blocks with his bow, buying himself a few seconds, which it turns out is exactly all he needed. A sound from above settles it. Clebius has broken out of his room. The next phase is moving on its own now, and Ed's part in this is done. He exhales, steps back, and lets Taylor's elemental slash connect. The strike sends him into the wall, and that's the end of it. Everyone's left standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out what they just watched. Taylor hauls Ed up and demands an explanation. Elvira hangs back, quietly running the math on a fight that never quite added up. And it really doesn't. Ed's a second year. He had every opportunity to hit them hard after the chandelier came down. Instead, he planted himself in the middle of the hall and held the line, not to win, but to stall. Taylor shoves him away, frustrated. Ed, battered and barely upright, tells them in a low, steady voice to stop wasting time on him and get upstairs before things get worse. That lands like a slap. Elvira rounds on him immediately, demanding to know why he spent the entire fight blocking them if he was going to point them upstairs anyway. Taylor and Ayla pile on. Nobody's moving until they get a real answer. Before Ed can give one, the hall door opens. A girl steps in out of the rain, hood pulled up, and stops cold at what she sees. Taylor, Elvira, and Ayla standing over a bloodied Ed in a hall that looks like it lost a war. It's Janica. She'd been waiting for him at the Rose Garden, figured he might be near the pavilion. She was not expecting this. Her voice cuts through the silence as she demands to know what happened, to the hall, and to Ed. For Janica, Ed isn't just someone she knows. He's the person who made her feel like she mattered, whose straightforward way of moving through the world stuck with her long after the Glasgow hunt. He has a way of making problems feel solvable just by being around. Standing here now, looking at him like this, something clicks into place. He sent her away from Ophelis Hall tonight, not randomly, but deliberately. Knowing she'd already taken the fall once for the Glasgow incident, he was keeping her out of it. That realization hits her somewhere deep. He never asked for anything in return, but she's here now, and she's not leaving without doing something with that. Janica pulls out her hairpin, sets it aside, and the energy in the room shifts. When she speaks again, it isn't a question. It's a demand to know what exactly everyone thinks they're doing. Something about her tone makes it clear this is no longer Ed's fight alone. Taylor, still processing, tells her he's glad she's safe, then fills her in. Protesters have taken Ophelis Hall. Ed spent the whole night blocking them from reaching the upper floors. Taylor's working theory is that Ed was covering for someone up there. Elvira is the first to clock it. Janica isn't on their side anymore. Before anyone can process that, Janica's magic detonates outward, a pressure wave that turns the entire hall into a wind tunnel. Ed calls her name. She tells him, with eerie calm, that everything is fine. It is not. Fine. An entire battalion of intermediate-level spirit beasts materializes around her, and Taylor's group goes completely still. The kind of still that means their bodies have already made a decision their brains haven't caught up to yet. Elvira reaches that conclusion first and starts pushing for a retreat. Janica, she argues, is simply out of their league. Taylor disagrees. Of course he does. Elvira reasons with him. He doesn't move. This is who Taylor is, the kind of person who treats a tactical ceiling as a personal challenge. Then Ed steps in. Battered as he is, he grabs Taylor and yanks him clear just before one of the spirit beasts connects. Then he tells them all to go upstairs and follow the original plan. That lands strangely. The man who spent the last stretch of this night physically blocking their path is now the one telling them to hurry up. Elvira pushes back. Ed's response is to lightly bonk her on the head, hand her back her bag of chemicals, and repeat himself. The message lands. They go. With the group heading upstairs, Ed turns back to Janica. She's still deep in her summoning, spirits swirling around her, and when she notices him, she tells him to stand down, that she has it handled, that he doesn't need to push himself anymore. Ed says her name quietly. Then he puts his hands on her shoulders. It stops her cold. He's never touched her like that before, and the gesture cuts right through the magic. In a worn-out voice, he asks her to call off the spirits. The wind is too strong, he tells her, and he can barely stay on his feet. That's all it takes. Janica looks at him, really looks at him, and lets the magic go. The spirit beasts dissolve. The hall goes quiet. From the stairs, Taylor's group watches in disbelief. All of that power, and Ed talked her down in about 30 seconds. Ed glances up at them and tells them to move. That time is short. Then, having apparently used the last of whatever was keeping him upright, he collapses. Sometime later, the two of them are sitting together. Janica tends to his wounds with the focused irritation of someone who is worried and expressing it as anger, directing most of it at Taylor's group for the state Ed is in. Ed, for his part, floats the idea of getting revenge on them next time they meet. This does not help Janica's stress levels. She makes him promise not to get hurt again. He thanks her, genuinely, and means it. He's satisfied. Things didn't go cleanly, but the task is done. He gets up to head back to his camp, and then Janica stops him. She mentions something she noticed earlier. A large carriage parked near the garden, decorated with a golden crown. Ed goes still. He knows that symbol. It belongs to the Golden King, head of the Merchant Association's elite, and the man who raised Lortel. The problem is that in the game, the Golden King doesn't show up until Act 2, as a minor antagonist who eventually gets taken down by Lortel herself. He has no business being here right now. Ed doesn't have an explanation for it, just the uncomfortable sense that the story is no longer running on the schedule he memorized. Up on the 5th floor of Awfulest Hall, Lortel stands at a wide window, expression unreadable. Alice, the hall's chief maid, stands beside her. Alice has been here since she was 15, worked her way up from nothing to running the entire operation, and Lortel, recognizing exactly what that kind of competence is worth, paid handsomely to secure her loyalty. Now Lortel is talking about Ed. She describes him as cold, someone who heard her out and turned away without a second thought. She frames it less as a complaint and more as a confirmation of something she already believed, that people in her experience tend to disappoint. The gold is handed over without ceremony. Lortel frames it as gratitude, but what she's really buying is confirmation that Alice sees the world the same way she does. Someone who trades values for coin, a kindred spirit, in Lortel's estimation. Her mind drifts briefly to where that worldview was forged. The slums, daily survival, betrayal as background noise. It's the lens through which she reads everyone, and it's the lens that shaped her into what she is now, a hidden villain working from the inside. Her current move is to funnel Berserker defense magic to Willen's group on the 4th floor and let Awfulest Hall tear itself apart, students included. Confident the pieces are in place, she walks with Alice toward the storage room. As far as Lortel is concerned, the loyalty is locked in. Then Alice draws her sword and puts it at Lortel's throat. Her aura drops like a weight on the room. She makes herself clear, she is nothing like Lortel. The words land harder than the blade. For someone who has spent her entire life reading people and pricing them accordingly, this is a failure she didn't see coming. The solitude of that hits her all at once. She doesn't move. Can't, really. Meanwhile, Taylor's team is having a considerably more active afternoon. Floor by floor, they work through it, calming Clebius, taking down the maid bosses, managing each crisis as it comes. The 1st floor is rough. After that, things find a rhythm, until the 4th floor. Willen is already gone by the time they arrive. The defensive magic runes have taken hold, and his body is running on unstable energy he can't control. He's holding a crystal ball that has become genuinely dangerous, and he knows it. He's calling for help, but the magic isn't interested in his feelings about it. The students hear the chaos, assume the building is coming down, and flood into the hallways. Whatever organized shape the protest had is gone. Taylor's group doesn't hesitate. Taylor absorbs Willen's blast directly, buying time for the others to get the students out. Once the floors are clear, they turn back to Willen, who has not gotten better in the interim. His attacks are escalating. Elvira runs the numbers and concludes that magic isn't going to cut it here. She produces an anglerweed reagent, something that can dull magical output, and lays out the plan. They have to knock Willen out the old-fashioned way. Taylor takes point. Elvira buys him an opening by throwing Clebius, yes, throwing him, forward as a distraction, and the group moves in, cutting angles through Willen's wild swings. Taylor gets close. Close enough. Then the runes go critical. Willen lights up, and the explosion that follows shakes the entire hall. Outside in the garden, Ed and Janica watch the smoke rise. Janica is focused on Ed's injuries. He tells her most of the blood isn't his, which is technically reassuring, and also not the point she was making. But Ed isn't thinking about the explosion. He's thinking about the carriage parked outside the hall, the one belonging to the Golden King's elite of the Merchant Association. The Golden King is Lortel's adoptive father, and more importantly, he's a character who has no business being here. In the game, he's a fake antagonist who doesn't show up until Act 2, and even then, he's eventually put down by Lortel herself. His presence now, quiet and unannounced, means something. Ed watches the carriage and starts working out what. What catches Ed's attention next makes the picture worse. Shenny, one of the maids of Ophalos Hall and a subordinate of Alice, is standing by the carriage, waiting for the Golden King. That shouldn't be happening. Alice is someone Lortel spent considerable effort winning over, and Shenny is one of her trusted maids. Seeing her here with the elite suggests the loyalty Alice pledged to Lortel wasn't as solid as it looked. The crack becomes a fracture in Ed's mind. Shenny's presence points to one conclusion. Alice has betrayed Lortel, and the stakes of that betrayal are immediate. Lortel is essential to the game's later acts. Lose her now, and the whole story collapses with her. If the Golden King gets inside, gains access to the sealed Book of Grimoire, and takes control of Ophalos Hall, there's no recovering the original storyline. Ed decides he needs to get ahead of this, taking on Lortel's role himself and keeping the Golden King from walking through that door. What Ed doesn't know yet is how this unraveled in the first place. Before the protest even began, Alice had already made her move, quietly writing a letter to the elite merchant king. In it, she laid out everything. That the Golden King is Lortel's adoptive father, that he's the man who had Lortel's biological father killed, that Lortel has been carefully maneuvering the business magnates and directors of the elite merchantry to dismantle him from the inside. She even included Lortel's plan to acquire or sabotage the sage's sealed grimoire, a calculated strike designed to blindside him and strip him of his position. Then Alice closed the letter with a demand, more money than Lortel was paying her, in exchange for switching sides entirely. Now she stands with her sword at Lortel's neck, waiting for the Golden King to arrive and collect. Lortel, for all her composure, is shaken. She pushes back at Alice, reminding her that they both wanted the same thing, revenge against the Golden King. Alice doesn't argue the point. She just sighs, apologizes, and tells Lortel something that lands harder than any accusation, that Lortel, Alice, and the Golden King are all cut from the same cloth. Ambition, survival, no real difference between them. Lortel has no answer for that. Then the door explodes open. Taylor and his group storm in, dragging a restrained and defeated Willain behind them. They're roughed up, but they made it. Elvira reads the room fast. Alice has to be the one behind everything, since only she could have supplied Willain with the defensive magic runes. Lortel sees her opening. She collapses to the floor, as dramatically as the moment allows. Taylor's group rushes to her, concern overriding everything else. She hides her tears, plays helpless, and then without a word gets up and runs, straight to her room. Her mind is already moving. The shock of seeing the Golden King here in person hits her the moment she processes it. The man who operated entirely from the shadows has walked into Ophalos Hall himself. But Lortel doesn't let the shock sit for long. His presence is actually useful. The large-scale tampering with the Merchant Association's account books, the damage from the chaos, she can pin all of it on him. His downfall is right there, if she moves fast enough. Her room has a carrier pigeon. The pigeon carries a message to the Merchant Association's officials. The message exposes the Golden King's crimes. After that, she finds somewhere in the hall to stay out of reach and lets the pieces fall. The plan is clean. She just needs to execute it. Alice's betrayal stings, genuinely, but Lortel has been hurt by people before, and she knows how to redirect that pain into something useful. She wipes her face and moves. At the same time, the Golden King enters the hall with his guards, unhurried and composed. He spots a student near the entrance and calmly tells them to get out for their own safety. The student doesn't move. He informs the elite that no one is permitted inside the hall. Safety protocols. The elite looks puzzled, maybe a little amused. Then he gets a better look at who he's dealing with. It's Ed, planted at the foot of the stairs like he was built there, with no badge, no authority, and no intention of stepping aside. The elite keeps his composure and asks, reasonably enough, whether Ed has any official standing to to be enforcing anything. Ed tells him he's acting on his own judgment, which is either very brave or very stupid, depending on how the next few minutes go. Ed runs the math in his head. 3 people actually understand what's happening in this hall right now. Lortel, who wants the elite gone for what he did to her childhood. The elite himself, who's here for the sage's sealed grimoire. And Alice, the chief maid, who just burned Lortel's trust to the ground and made herself the villain of this act. Ed's already handed Alice off. Taylor and his group can deal with her. His job is this staircase. The elite tries a softer angle, saying he just needs to speak with the academy about the chaos. Ed doesn't move. That patience starts to wear thin. The elite activates his aura and cuts to the real question. Is Ed taking Lortel's side? 10 minutes earlier, Ed and Janica were at Jix's room. Most of the building had already cleared out. Jix was doing exercises, calmly, while everything around him was falling apart. When they asked why he hadn't evacuated, he said he preferred to stay out of it and stick to his routine. Fair enough. Then he looked at Ed and Janica together and asked if they were dating. Janica shut that down immediately and loudly, then immediately worried she'd made it awkward. Ed quietly let Jix know he'd put his foot in it. Jix apologized. Once the air cleared, Jix asked what they actually wanted, especially given that they'd shown up uninvited and had apparently taken part of his wall with them on the way in. Ed asked for a favor, straight out, and promised to pay it back. Jix wasn't thrilled, but he agreed. Back in the hall, while Ed holds the line against Keklin, Jix and Janica are watching from somewhere out of sight. Keklin shifts tactics and tries to work on Ed's sympathies, painting Lortel as ungrateful, recounting how he raised her, framing her whole plan as a betrayal. When that doesn't land, he offers to double whatever Lortel promised anyone backing her. Ed makes it clear that money isn't the point. Keklin drops the diplomacy and tells his guards to remove Ed. They surround him, they overpower him, and then Jix steps out and sends them across the room with wind magic. Jix and Janica drop the pretense of hiding. Janica calls her spirit companions. Jix gets ready to fight. Ed thanks them, reminds Jix he'll make good on the favor, and heads upstairs. Keklin looks at the 2 students now standing between him and his guards and tells his men to give everything they have. The fight breaks out in full. Jix and Janica hold the floor. Ed takes the stairs. When he finds Lortel, he doesn't slow down. He tells her to get out through the back door and run. Lortel hears him, and somewhere underneath the urgency, something older surfaces. In her world, kindness has always been a transaction. Loyalty came from investment. Everyone she'd ever counted on had a reason, a price, a ledger. She'd believed in something different once. She'd looked up to Janica Failover, someone who seemed to give without keeping score. Now, standing here, she wonders if that was the most foolish thing she ever let herself believe. Watching Ed and Janica's dynamic had planted a question in Lortel that she couldn't shake, whether a bond like that was something she could ever have. Then Alice happened. And just like that, the question answered itself, or so she thought. She tells herself she was stupid to want something like that she should have stayed exactly who she was, cold, precise, and unbothered by trust. Of the 5 people she'd placed inside the hall, 4 had folded. Alice went to the elite. Shenny and Kelly followed. Willin leaned the same way. That left Ed, and Lortel had already written his betrayal in advance, just hadn't filled in the date yet. As they move through the hall, Ed asks whether Alice was the one who turned on her. Lortel stops. She doesn't answer the question directly. Instead, in a quiet, almost deflated voice, she tells him she can't guarantee the 20 gold coins anymore. The plan is slipping. She's lost her grip on it. Ed doesn't even blink at the money. He tells her that was never the point, takes her arm, and pulls her back into motion. If the elite gets to her, it's over. Not just the plan, but everything she's been building toward. That lands differently than she expected. For a moment, Lortel genuinely doesn't know what to do with it. The idea that someone might be helping her without a ledger running in the background is so foreign, it almost reads as suspicious. Almost. Still moving, Ed asks the real question. What's actually going on between the Merchant Association and the elite, and why Keshlin came to the academy himself, so Lortel lays it out. Her adoptive father has been bleeding money for years, hiding losses behind manipulated prices and a stranglehold on the armor trade. He needs a major score to keep his position, and Sage's sealed grimoire is it. He sent Lortel to the academy to find a way to get it, steal it, sabotage it, whatever worked. What Ketchlin doesn't know is that Lortel has spent years quietly flipping merchants and committee members inside the association. Every alliance she built was a step toward the same end: expose him, remove him, and settle what he did to her. Ed connects the rest on his own. Ketchlin's desperation is why he showed up early. The rushed moves on the armor trade, the push for the grimoire, he's overextended and that makes him vulnerable. And Lortel's plan to burn Ophalos Hall wasn't random chaos. It was a pressure play, designed to tilt the grimoire negotiations toward the elite and draw Ketchlin out of headquarters. With him gone, her allies inside the association can move to transfer the rights of sale to her. The whole thing is a trap, and he walked into it ahead of schedule. Lortel Lortel confirms it and adds one more piece. She has a carrier pigeon ready to send the signal, but her father isn't entirely blind to the possibility of being played. He's expecting her to get caught, and he plans to use that to flush out the traitors in his ranks. The window is narrow. When they reach her room, Ed shifts into logistics. He walks her through exactly how to get out, the horsemen in the quarters, the route to the Arkan Mountains, where to ditch the carriage to throw off the elite's guards, and where to lie low after. His place in the forest, 3 days, no contact. He'll handle the message to her allies himself, from her room. He spots someone watching the back door and tells her to hold. Then he turns, puts his hands on her shoulders, and makes sure she's actually hearing him. Stay hidden. Don't be seen. Wait. Lortel is watching him the whole time. The steadiness of it, the lack of panic, and something in her quietly shifts. When Ed notices she's gone still, she asks him, in a voice that's softer than she probably intended, why he's doing all of this for her. He tells her there's no reason. He just feels like he should. It's the most disarming answer he could have given, because it's the one she has no framework for. Ed walks out and leaves her with that. Alone in her room, Lortel sits with the silence, and then notices something. A sound, steady and loud, coming from inside her own chest. It's her heartbeat, and it's not slowing down. No one had ever helped her like that before. No angle, no debt, no expectation, just help. The feeling is so foreign she doesn't quite know what to do with it. Across the hall, things are considerably less quiet. Taylor's group is locked in a full fight with Alice, the chief maid, who isn't going down easy. She pulls every rune in the hall under her control and turns their magic into weapons. Impressive, but not impressive enough. Taylor is the hero of failed swordsman of Sylvania, and that title means something. Alice never really had a chance. Back at the rear door, Ed finds Shenny waiting. She doesn't hesitate. Sword out, moving fast, going straight for his leg. Ed sidesteps it. He already knows how she fights. He's played this game. He traps her blade underfoot, catches her hands before she can reach her knives, and strips her of both. Shenny shifts tactics. She and her twin Kelly share a birth star, and with it, a low-level telekinesis. Blades and objects start flying at Ed from every direction. Some of them connect, but her magic is rough and uncontrolled, so the damage is shallow. Ed pulls the blades out, closes the distance, and pins her face down with his knee on her back. That's when she starts crying. She can't fail Alice, she says. And then she tells Ed why. Alice took in orphans, saved lives, saved Shenny. It's a real story, and a sad one. Ed listens. Then he tells her plainly that Alice is going to lose anyway. The explosion from Taylor's slash-element attack settles the argument. The whole floor shakes. Shenny screams, and then goes still, out cold from the shock of it. Ed doesn't linger on the tragedy. He drags Shenny inside, props her against the wall, and moves on. These side stories exist in the margins of the plot. His survival doesn't. He makes it to Lortel's room, takes a moment to clock how precisely it matches her, the books, the furniture, all of it exactly right, and then gets to work. Message written, pigeon sent. Elite Keklin is currently in Sylvania, which buys them at least 3 days before anyone at headquarters knows what's happening. By the time night falls, Ed is done. Soaked, cut up, limping, but done. He stopped Elite from reaching the hall, built Lortel an exit, and kept the storyline on track. The horse carriage is already drawing Elite's people in the wrong direction. Everything held together. He pushes open the door to his hut and stops. Lortel is walking toward him, knife in hand, expression unreadable, and not in a good way. For one very bad moment, Ed's mind goes somewhere dark. What if she's been the one pulling strings all along? What if he's the last loose end? He can't move. His thoughts are getting ahead of him fast. Then Lortel reaches him and tears a strip from her own clothes to bandage his wounds. The knife was for cutting fabric, that's all. Ed exhales. Lortel's expression up close is nothing like what he imagined. Her eyes are quiet and careful as she tends to him, then guides him inside where she's already got a fire going. She suggests they warm up together first. Her cheeks go a little pink when she says it. The fire does its job. Ed dries off, the tension of the night slowly leaving him, and the two of them fall into easy conversation. Lortel mentions the carriage driver, the one who volunteered to pull the elite's guards away from her, knowing full well what that risk meant. Ed finds himself wondering how she inspires that kind of loyalty in people. Then he remembers who he's sitting next to, Lortel Keklin. He lets the question go. After a beat of quiet, Lortel thanks him properly and acknowledges that she owes him not a small favor but a real one. When she notices he's not exactly buzzing with personality in response, she calls him out for being dull. Ed's reply is about as romantic as a receipt. Just have the 20 gold coins ready when the deal closes. The silence that follows is comfortable enough until Lortel breaks it. She asks with a careful kind of curiosity whether he and Janica are close. Ed doesn't hesitate. He speaks about Janica warmly, the kind of person you can count on. Genuinely good. Lortel listens without interrupting. Her expression softens, but there's something underneath it, a quiet kind of weight. She adds her own words about Janica, and they're kind words, but the tone doesn't match them. Ed picks up on it and asks what she's actually trying to say. Lortel takes a breath, then lets it out slowly. With a faint smile, she admits it plainly. She's not like Janica, not the type who puts others first, not naturally caring. She says it without bitterness, but she says it. Meanwhile, back at Awfulness Hall, Jix and Janica are still in the middle of it. They've been holding off Elite Kecklin and his guards, but the moment Elite gets word that Lortel has escaped, he drops everything and goes after her himself. That leaves Jix alone with the guards, and it's not going well for him at all. Then Janica shifts. The nervousness she'd been carrying disappears, and her spirit magic aura ignites. A full tornado tears through the hall, guards flying in every direction as her spirits cut loose. Jix, watching the destruction unfold, yells at her to stop. Janica pauses and turns to him with a smile that doesn't quite fit the situation. Eyes bright, completely calm, she assures him she's not angry at all, which somehow makes it worse. The next morning, Ed is outside his hut scrubbing what's left of his academy uniform. After a night like that, skipping class wasn't a hard call. Jix shows up with a spare uniform and a full debrief. Willain has absorbed all the blame for the destruction of Awfullos Hall. Chief Maid Alice, now in custody, hasn't said a word. Lortel is safely tucked away in Ed's hut, and there's still no word yet from Elite Kexlin. Ed lets himself feel relieved. The plan held. All that's left is waiting for the carrier pigeon to come back with good news. His body is still paying for the night, sore in ways he'll be feeling for a while, but the outcome is what matters. Then he checks his stats. The numbers have moved. He's reached intermediate craftsman rank, and with it comes a new tier of abilities. He zeroes in on Spirit Formula Infusion, a skill that bridges spirit sorcery and magic engineering, letting him form contracts with spirits and build weapons, artifacts, tools, the kind of versatility that changes what he can do going forward. He starts thinking through the possibilities immediately. Later that day, Janica shows up. Ed is outside getting some movement in when she arrives and settles beside him. He asks why she's not in class. She says she needed air, tired, wanted a break, came to the woods. Ed asks more carefully whether she got hurt because of him. She shakes her head and tells him she's fine. Then, with a small frown, she asks about Lortel. Ed tells her Lortel is resting inside. Janica takes that in, keeps her expression neutral, and does a decent job of hiding the fact that she's not entirely thrilled about it. Inside the hut, Lortel exhales. The Awfullos Hall incident is behind her. For now, at least she can breathe, but the relief doesn't last long. Lortel still has one more move to make. She needs to convince the chief maid, Alice, to help set up negotiations for Sage's sealed grimoire. For now, all she can do is wait on a reply from the elite merchant's headquarters. Waiting turns out to be its own problem. Sitting in Ed's hut, Lortel starts noticing things she hadn't before. How easy it is to breathe around him. How little he asks for in return for his trust. Something about that gets to her. She blushes. And for someone who has spent her whole life measuring everything in gold, that's a significant development. She makes a decision. She's not giving Ed up to Janica, who already has a full life and plenty of people in it. Lortel is going to compete, and she's going to win. 3 days in his company only makes that resolve sharper. She starts running through strategies, including, briefly, just burying him in gold. She scraps that idea. Better to be warm, useful, maybe quietly cover his tuition. Something that doesn't scream, I am trying to buy your affection, even if the line is thin. It's the first time she's ever wanted something that money couldn't simply solve, and the novelty of it is equal parts thrilling and mortifying. She's never had a boyfriend. She's barely finished the thought before Lucy crashes through the window. Ed handles it without missing a beat. He hauls Lucy out and deposits her in the small tent he'd already built outside, apparently anticipating exactly this. Then he turns back and apologizes to Lortel for the interruption. Lortel accepts the apology, but internally she's already filed Lucy under a new category, natural disaster. The next morning, Lortel wakes up early with a plan. It doesn't survive contact with reality. Janica is already there. Lortel sighs, turns around, and heads back inside, where Lucy is still asleep and completely unbothered by the world. Ed, meanwhile, has been busy. He picks up stonemasonry, builds a brick fireplace inside the hut, and by the time everyone's awake, he's grilling beef jerky for the group. Over the meal, Lortel notes that the morning passed without incident, which means things are moving as planned. Ed thanks her and tells everyone not to get comfortable yet. Then, feeling the competitive pressure, Lortel sweetens her end of their deal, supplies and goods, instead of the 20 gold coins they'd originally agreed on. Ed takes her up on it and asks if she can source construction materials or spare magic engineering equipment. She says she'll look into it. Then he turns to Janica with a request of his own. Teach him basic spirit magic and how to form a spirit connection. Janica lights up. She pulls out a spirit bird and starts walking him through the process. Focus, connection, the fundamentals. The spirit bird then interrupts her to point out that she's explaining it wrong. And while it's at it, it also mentions that during their last spirit meeting, Janica received specific advice on how to use Ed's cabin construction as a chance to get closer to him. Janica dispels the bird at speed, visibly sweating, and asks Ed, very casually, how much of that he caught. Lortel doesn't let the moment go to waste. She pivots smoothly into offering Ed her leftover food stock from headquarters at a discount. Ed counters, asking her to fold it into the original 20 gold deal. Lortel, with a smile clearly aimed at Janica, offers to just give it to him for free. Janica objects. A debate starts. Ed eats his beef jerky and watches, quietly noting that he somehow ended up with a spirit magic tutor and a magic engineering supplier, both highly motivated. Then someone new arrives at the hut. Belle Maya, the new chief maid of Ophalis Hall, shows up with an apology for the unannounced visit and a message from the former chief maid, Alice. The mood shifts immediately. Lortel's expression tightens, and whatever lightness was in the air a moment ago disappears. What no one at the hut knows yet is what happened just before Belle Maya arrived. One of Janica's friends, Clara, had stopped by to see her and passed along a piece of news she described as top secret, delivered in a whisper with strict instructions not to react. The news: Janica is in love with Ed Roth Taylor. Belle Maya did her best to keep her face neutral. Whether she managed it is another question. Clara and Belle continue picking apart Ed's situation. His reputation as a troublemaker is softening lately, but his awareness of Janica's feelings is apparently non-existent. Clara supports her friend, though she can't ignore that Janica keeps bringing Lortel's name into conversations that have nothing to do with her. Clara admits she doesn't fully understand either of them. Her read on it is blunt. Relationships are about balance, and Janica is too trusting for that kind of game. Ed, meanwhile, is either oblivious to every hint Janica drops or doing a very convincing impression of it. Clara practically begs Belle to intervene. Belle offers a gentler theory that Ed is too buried in his own problems to even register romance as a category right now. She suggests it might just be his particular brand of bad luck with people. Clara doesn't find that comforting. If anything, it unsettles her more. Back at Ed's hut, Belle Maya arrives to find Lucy, Lortel, and Janica all present, which gives her an immediate headache. When Lortel asks why she's there, Belle delivers Alice's message. That evening, she takes the sleepy Lucy and Janica with her, and Ed is left frustrated, not about the company, but about the exposure. Lortel's location has now been seen by someone connected to people who shouldn't know where she is. To limit the damage, Lortel decides to leave with Belle Maya, who offers a safe house. Before she goes, she hands Ed a repaired uniform, her way of settling the debt for his help. Ed takes it gratefully, noting it'll serve as a decent backup set for the academy. Then a pigeon arrives with better news than expected. A letter confirms a major victory over the elite in business sales, a blow significant enough to signal his collapse at the merchant headquarters. Ed can finally return to school without looking over his shoulder. Lortel reads the letter and draws her own conclusion. Her father is now fighting for survival and won't have the bandwidth to chase her through Sylvania. She's safe for now, but she doesn't let Ed get comfortable with that. Her father is still dangerous, and she warns him not to treat this as a clean win. Even so, she's confident in her allies at the headquarters and believes the chairman's seat is within reach. What's actually weighing on her is Alice. Ed raises the obvious concern. Could Alice expose Lortel as the one who orchestrated the Ophalis Hall incident? Lortel brushes it off. Alice backs whoever is winning. That's just who she is. The letter itself makes that clear. Alice details the orphanages she's been sponsoring and asks Lortel to fund them for the next year. Lortel fills in the backstory. Years of overwork had broken Alice's health, and the academy offered nothing. Faced with responsibilities she could no longer carry, including the orphanage, Alice made a calculated move during the Ophalis Hall incident and switched sides for money and support. It looked like betrayal. Lortel understands why she did it. Still, reading between the lines, Lortel's conclusion is simple. Alice is backing her because she thinks she'll win. In the merchant world, that's not loyalty, it's arithmetic. Lortel will keep Alice close, but the trust they had before is gone. As she wraps things up, Lortel reminds Ed to stop by the Merchant Association branch to finalize their supply delivery contract. Ed hands her a fire torch for the walk. She takes it, then pauses, just standing there, looking at him. When he asks what she's waiting for, she remarks on how tall he is. She mentions almost casually that she tends to make risky moves when she wants to win. Then she steps in, reaches up, and straightens his tie. She tells him he looks good in the new uniform, and before he can respond, she grabs the tie, pulls him down, and kisses him. Afterward, she teases him about the raspberries they'd eaten earlier, claims she can taste them again. She laughs, clearly delighted with herself. Ed, stone-faced, tells her to stay within her limits. Lortel finds his reaction deeply boring and says so. She also leaves him with a parting note. Next time, she says, he should try pulling her closer. She needs the practice of pretending to resist. Then she takes the torch, walks off at a normal pace, and the moment she's far enough away, she sprints into the forest and vanishes. Ed stands there, thoroughly thrown. No matter how carefully he tries to stay on the edges of the story, he knows is unfolding around him. It keeps pulling him in. Later, sitting by his campfire with the trees above him and crickets filling the silence, he can't quite settle. Something is sitting wrong, and the quiet isn't helping. The discomfort isn't irrational. Ed's original plan was clean and contained. Watch the game's events from a safe distance, intervene only when the scenario needed a nudge, and spend the rest of his energy on surviving, graduating, and keeping his stats in order. Simple enough, in theory. In practice, it's turning into something else entirely. As summer gives way to fall, Ed finds himself wondering what the game is going to throw at him next, and whether he'll have any say in it. The next day, Janica convenes with her spirit companions by the lake to talk through her Lortel problem. The spirits fill her in on what happened between Lortel and Ed, and she does not take it well. One of them describes Lortel in terms that make clear exactly what kind of threat they think she is, and Janica's first question is how Ed responded. When she hears he was cold and gave nothing away, she relaxes, briefly. Spirit Tarkin cuts that relief short, warning her that Lortel doesn't back off. She doubles down, and if Janica doesn't move fast, she'll lose Ed's attention before she ever really had it. Tarkin then proceeds to offer a string of suggestions so absurd that the other spirits physically remove him from the conversation. Spirit Marlita steps in with something actually usable. Marlita's advice is straightforward. Create a moment with Ed that sticks, something he'll keep thinking about. Janica turns it over and lands on a shared meal as a reasonable starting point. That evening, Ed tests out a new recipe on Lucy. She takes one bite and makes her feelings immediately known. Ed doesn't argue. He just writes down what went wrong and decides his cooking ambitions can wait until he has better ingredients to work with. The failure still earns him something, though. A stat upgrade, pushing his craftsmanship to intermediate level. It's a reminder of how much his core stats shape everything else he does. He makes a note to develop them more evenly. The problem is time. Between classes, survival training, and tracking the game's scenario, there isn't much of it left over. He checks in on the key players. Taylor's combat skills are coming along. Isla is still in Taylor's corner. Princess Fina appears to be on course. The collision between Fina and Lortel is getting closer, and Ed knows it. He also knows Clarice won't show up until next year, so she's not his problem yet. And while Elite's early exit introduces some unpredictability around Lortel, Ed is confident it won't stop her from going after the sage's sealed grimoire. When the academy day ends, Ed pauses outside and looks back at the main building. Act 2's final boss is about to surface, which means the faculty building needs to be on his radar now. Inside the academy, someone else is also putting pieces together. A letter arrives identifying the person behind the Ophelis Hall incident, and it lands in the hands of Professor Glast. Glast is in his office when his assistant, Claire Elfin, tries to earn some goodwill by complimenting his instincts for suspecting foul play in the first place. He doesn't bite. He sets down his glasses, and whatever warmth Claire was hoping for doesn't materialize. He tells her to retrieve the divine science thesis he'd already asked for, and the sharpness in his tone sends her out the door at speed. Over at the Ophelis Hall faculty building, Claire collects the incident materials from Annis and starts going through the student files connected to the case. 3 names stand out: Ed Roth, Taylor, Jix, and Janica. Most of the files read clearly enough. Ed's doesn't. Something about his record, his reputation, the gaps in it, leaves Claire with questions she can't quite set aside. That evening, Ed stops by the Sylvania Merchant Association branch to pick up the supplies he ordered under his contract with Lortel. Lortel greets him with a playful apology for conveniently forgetting the contract terms, a transparent excuse to get him through the door again. She sets out tea and snacks and invites him to stay. She mentions his equipment is waiting at the counter whenever he's ready to leave, then pivots to showing off what she's wearing for an important meeting, clearly fishing for a reaction. Ed's response is to ask what the meeting is actually about. Lortel took his indifference in stride. When the conversation turned to his cabin, she pointed out he'd probably need furniture, but Ed noted that her company's prices were well out of his range. She agreed she couldn't just hand things out for free, merchant ethics and all that. Then she used her magic to snap a chair leg clean off, declared it damaged goods, and mentioned she'd be throwing it away tomorrow. Purely coincidentally, someone with crafting skills could probably fix it up. Ed thanked her for the broken chair with the same flat composure he brought to everything. Lortel found that endlessly entertaining. She moved closer, perched on the nearby table, and asked him directly, did he not see her as a woman? She wasn't helping him out of the goodness of her heart, she admitted. She had her own reasons, and she had no intention of disappearing until she got what she came for. Ed's response was simple. He wasn't looking for answers from her, and he had no interest in fighting battles he already knew he'd lose. Lortel smiled at that, unfazed. She told him that someday, she wouldn't be the only one struggling to keep her feelings in check. Ed noticed something watching her. That smile never changed. Not when she was winning, not when she was cornered. He recognized it for what it was, a merchant's discipline. Never let your face tell the story your words won't. Over at the academy during recess, Janica took it upon herself to teach Ed how to connect with a spirit. She walked him through focusing his magic, then summoned a small fire spirit named Mug to demonstrate. Mug arrived with the energy of someone who had prepared a formal speech, promising to serve Ed with full dedication. Ed was visibly caught off guard. It brought back a memory. Back when he'd played the game as Ed, he'd once bonded with a spirit duck. They'd had a good run, easy and light, and eventually he'd let it go. Mug was clearly going to be a different kind of relationship. He asked Janica why Mug was so serious about all this. She laughed and explained that Mug was an excellent spirit. Strong energy efficiency, solid temperament, personally selected by a high-level spirit named Tarkin. Ed had asked for something capable, so she'd gone and found him the best option available. After a proper selection process, the bond was made official. Ed held Mug and immediately noticed the warmth. The spirit ran hot, practically a walking heat source. He checked the stats, and Janica cheerfully pointed out the best part. No firewood required. Seeing Ed genuinely pleased made Janica smile, even if he still looked like he hadn't slept properly in days. Before wrapping up, she offered to keep teaching him. More time together meant faster progress, she said. Then something shifted. Mid-sentence, her tone changed completely. She caught herself, remembered advice from her friend Clara about not getting too attached too quickly, and pivoted. Suddenly she was very busy actually, with a long line of students waiting for her time. Ed, reading the situation as a burden he'd created, apologized and offered to pay her for her help. That landed badly. Janica insisted she was helping him as a friend, not a client, and that bringing money into it was cold. Ed reasonably pointed out that she had been the one to mention compensation first. Janica realized she'd walked straight into that contradiction and had no clean way out. To her credit, she came clean. Her friend Clara had told her she was too generous and needed to practice saying no. Ed said Clara sounded right. It was a surprisingly smooth landing for an awkward moment. Janica left in good spirits, promising to see him at combat training and mentioning she'd bring a special accessory next time. Mug stayed with Ed, and he waved her off. Between Lortel's engineering knowledge and Janica's spirit, Ed finally had something resembling a real foundation, proper crafting skills, a fire that didn't need tending, and a setup that actually worked. For the first time in a while, things were starting to look livable. Late at night, Ed glances out his window and remembers he never checked his traps. He heads into the forest. He's not the only one out there. Claire Elfin has been quietly building a case, and her prime suspect is Ed. His family disowned him. He has no known ties to Ophelis Hall, and yet something about him doesn't add up. Reports keep placing him in the woods, so that's where she goes. She's moving carefully through the trees when she hears footsteps and ducks out of sight. What she sees stops her cold. A man hauling Lucy over one shoulder and dragging a dead deer with the other. No magic, just raw physical ability. That rules out Principal Obel immediately, and the moment she gets a clear look, Claire's suspicion locks into place. It's Ed Roth Taylor. As far as she's concerned, she's found her mastermind. She follows him back through the forest, surprised to find a hidden hut she had no idea existed. From a distance, she watches him toss Lucy into a tent and drop the deer by the fireplace before heading inside for the night. Claire waits, then moves in to rescue Lucy. She doesn't make it 2 steps before Lucy fires off a warning spell and demands to know who she is. Claire introduces herself flustered. Lucy stares at her for a moment, goes back into the tent, pulls out some beef jerky, gives Claire one more suspicious look, and then just flies away. Claire is left standing there with nothing to show for it. She takes what she has to Professor Glast. She lays out her evidence, emphasizes the disownment, and describes how Ed physically overpowered Lucy and kept her in a tent in the woods. Glast barely remembers who Ed is. He's not interested in low-ranking students, and he's even less interested in Claire's theory that a deer in a tent constitute a criminal operation. Lucy sleeps in the woods all the time, he tells her. This is not news. Claire shifts tactics and reveals she used magic to pull memories from the first floor of Office Hall. Glast's eyebrow goes up, not because he's impressed, but because she didn't have permission to do that. Claire fumbles through an explanation that doesn't quite hold together. He tells her to write an apology letter. She pushes anyway and makes him look at the recording. It shows Ed sitting on the stairs in a pose that admittedly does look like someone who planned everything. It also shows him stopping Taylor's group from going upstairs. Claire thinks this is damning. Glast asks if she has anything stronger. She brings up Lucy again. He tells her again to submit the letter. She leaves exhausted and empty-handed. Then Glast, alone, actually looks at the memory globe. He watches Ed hold his ground against Taylor and Elvira, the sword saint and the natural-born alchemist, and something shifts in his expression. That's not something an ordinary student does. For the first time, Glast takes Ed seriously. Out in the forest, Ed has no idea any of this is happening. He's just finished crafting a new weapon using both magic engineering and spirit magic. A ceremonial dagger, Explosion. It's the best thing he's made since going independent, and he knows it. Mug, watching Ed admire the dagger, offers some practical advice about improving efficiency through use. Then, almost immediately, pivots into singing a song in Ed's honor. Ed has been watching this behavior since Mug arrived, the flattery, the formality, all of it, and he's had enough. He picks Mug up, gives him a firm shake, and asks what's really going on. Mug stammers. Ed goes straight to the point. Did Janica promise him something? Mug hesitates, but Ed reminds him that a spirit bond means honesty isn't optional. That breaks him. Mug confesses through tears that while his respect for Ed is genuine, his real motive for taking the contract was far more practical. The refined magic around Janica lets him grow at twice the normal rate for a low-ranking spirit. Ed sighs and asks if there's anything else. there is. Mug admits he'd heard rumors about Ed's strict authoritarian reputation at the academy and decided that constant flattery was the safest way to avoid his temper. It's not a great strategy, but it's an honest one. Ed hears him out and tells him he gets it. Wanting to grow stronger isn't something to be ashamed of. And with that, the matter is settled. They head back to the hut together, Mug perched on Ed's shoulder, chatting like they've known each other for years. Life at the hut has quietly improved. Ed chops wood, his stamina noticeably better than before, his storage stocked with meat and vegetables. He's not sleeping outside hungry anymore. With the basics handled, he pushes harder on his studies, cutting sleep, drilling information, forcing himself to absorb it faster. It catches up with him. He passes out. He wakes up to find Janica standing over him, telling him he needs to take better care of himself. The concern is real, and Ed takes it seriously, partly because of her, and partly because of 3 letters waiting for him. The first is from the academy, the second is from the merchantry, the third is the one that matters. Ed recognizes immediately that this letter could determine the entire direction of Act 2. In the original game, Act 2's central event was a negotiation over the Sage's sealed grimoire, a tug of war between the Academy Student Association and the merchantry. But the fall of the elite has reshuffled things. The Roth-Taylor family has entered the picture, turning a 2-sided dispute into a 3-way conflict. And it's not just the family name on the table. Crepin Roth-Taylor, the family head, is involved personally. He wants the grimoire for his research into eternal life. The problem is that Crepin is originally a major boss in Act 4. Him showing up this early is the kind of complication that breaks a playbook entirely. No player at this stage would have any realistic chance against him. Ed knows exactly how dangerous Crepin is. If Crepin secures the grimoire, Ed's path through the game collapses. All his foreknowledge becomes worthless. The third letter contains critical details about Crepin's movements and suspicions around the grimoire, but whoever sent it didn't sign their name, which is its own problem. Meanwhile, at the academy, Princess Finia is taking tea in the garden when Captain Claire arrives to confirm he delivered Ed's letters on her orders. She thanks him, but her mind is elsewhere. The Sage's sealed grimoire is the Academy's most significant asset, and the idea of selling it for financial reasons is, to her, a disgrace. Principal Obel has already come to her directly, laying out the Academy's money troubles and asking for her support. She's aware. What she's less comfortable with is Crepin Roth-Taylor's sudden involvement. Captain Claire offers a theory that Ed tipped off his family, hoping it might earn him a way back into their good graces. Before he can develop the idea further, Lortel arrives and cuts him off. She's skeptical of his read, and smoothly asks the princess for permission to join the tea session. Fenya is surprised. She'd always assumed Lortel had no particular warmth toward her. But Lortel smiles, waves off the misunderstanding, and offers something concrete as a gesture of goodwill. It wasn't Ed who brought the Roth-Taylor family into this. It was Elite Ketchlin, Lortel's own adoptive father. And there's more. Crepin Roth-Taylor was the one who wanted the grimoire in the first place. With Ketchlin's influence at the merchant headquarters fading, he's leaning on Crepin's backing to push the purchase through anyway. That realization lands fast. If both families were originally working together on the deal, why are they now competing? Lortel's answer is simple. Because she's the one running the merchantry now, and she wants the grimoire for herself. She's not selling it to the Roth-Taylor family. That's her position, and she's stating it plainly. Finia, caught off guard by the directness, asks why Lortel is telling her any of this. Lortel's answer is equally direct. She considers Finia an ally. The logic she lays out is clean. Finia helps her secure the grimoire, Lortel's standing in the merchantry improves, and Finia gets leverage over the Roth-Taylor family in the process. 2 people, 1 deal, mutual benefit. Then Lortel adds one more thing. Ed has already been disowned, so suspecting him of colluding with his former family isn't just wrong. It's unfair. Fenya listens, but she's paying attention to more than the words. She's watching how Lortel speaks, how carefully each sentence is constructed, and something doesn't add up. Lortel has never gone out of her way for anyone like this. So Fenya decides to test her. She brings up Ed casually, mentions he might be useful, and suggests she could bring him in personally. Help or refuse, she'd find a way to make use of him either way. The teacup in Lortel's hand starts to shake. She sets it down, and then she laughs. Not a polite laugh, a real one, at the fact that even Princess Finia plays the same games everyone else does. Claire doesn't find it funny. He's ready to say something about it, but Fenya stops him before he can. Lortel stands, smooths everything over with a smile, and calls them allies one more time. Then she leaves Finia with a single piece of advice. Don't underestimate Ed Roth-Taylor. If she does, she'll regret it. After she's gone, Finia sits with the question Lortel left behind. Was Ed the one who pulled Crepin Roth-Taylor into the bidding? Or was it Lortel all along, engineering the whole thing from a position she never lets anyone see clearly? Watching her walk away, Finia realizes she doesn't know, and that's not a feeling she's used to. Back at the merchantry branch, Lortel finds Ed with Janica. She'd brought rosemary tea for 2. Janica gets a glass of cold water, and Lortel makes it clear that's not an oversight. She's a merchant, not a host. Janica finds this hilarious. Ed, exhausted, quietly trades his tea for the water and gives Janica his cup, which makes Janica happy, and Lortel visibly less so. Then Lortel brings out the magic engineering equipment she'd promised Ed. Janica's reaction is immediate. She calls it a violation of merchant ethics, handing over brand new equipment for free. Lortel points out the defects. Janica doesn't buy it. The argument goes in circles, with Lortel perfectly composed and Janica getting more irritated by the second. Ed tries to pump the brakes. He tells Lortel he can't keep accepting things he hasn't paid for. This is already the 4th time. Lortel dismisses it entirely. He's her customer. Contracts can be renewed. It's fine. Janica, watching this, tells Ed to settle his debts and walk away before Lortel has him wrapped around a payment plan he'll never escape. Lortel tells her to stay out of it. The two of them go back and forth, both clearly more interested in Ed's attention than in winning the argument. Ed, meanwhile, stops hearing any of it. A strange lightness moves through him, the kind that comes when his body has simply had enough. His mind is still running, still turning over the grimoire problem, still thinking about sleep, of all things, and a better mattress. But his body makes the decision for him. He goes down before he can do anything about it. Lortel and Janica drop everything and rush to his side. Meanwhile, at Sylvania Academy, Princess Fina has been turning Ed over in her mind. His composure at the fishing camp, his handling of the Glaskin incident, his reputation among students as someone who keeps his head down and studies, it all starts to cut against the assumptions she'd made. Lortel's words have been sitting with her, and she decides she needs one more look before she makes up her mind. So she's the one who sends the 3rd letter, a private invitation to the royal residence, meant to stay quiet. She reviews her schedule for the following day and asks Captain Claire when Ed is expected to arrive. Captain Claire's answer isn't what she was expecting. Ed has collapsed from overwork. Princess Fina takes a moment with that. In the game, exhaustion status means mandatory rest days. It's practically built into the rules. And so, with the Akerpin Roth Taylor event bearing down on him, Ed is forced to stop. Everything waits. When he wakes up in his hut, his body feels like it's made of wet stone. There's also an odd warmth across his lower belly, which turns out to be Lucy, asleep on top of him, mumbling to herself. Ed watches her for a moment, and it pulls him back to the Glaskin incident, to how unnaturally light she was when he threw her. The thought lingers. He doesn't push it far, mostly because he doesn't have the strength to move her even if he wanted to. He notices the new blankets, the mattress. The merchantry must have brought him here to recover. Lucy wakes up talking about food, which tracks. Then she registers that Ed is actually conscious and shifts gears. She's been running mana treatment on him while he was out, correcting his distorted mana flow, apparently more than once. She finishes a round now, then drifts right back to sleep beside him. Before she goes under, she gets one thing out. Stop getting sick. It's a hassle, and being weak is dangerous. Ed knows exactly where that comes from. Her grandfather died bedridden from illness. He thanks her, genuinely, for the treatment and for caring enough to say it. Then Jix walks in without knocking, checking on the stove. Lucy is gone before the door finishes opening, embarrassed enough to relocate entirely. Ed, now fully awake, takes stock of the situation. For someone who has been trying to stay independent, he has accumulated a remarkable number of people who show up uninvited. He asks Jix what he's doing here. Jix says he's been keeping watch while the others are out, then hands Ed a bowl of soup and mentions, almost as an aside, that it's autumn now. Ed asks about Sylvania Academy. Jix runs through it. Taylor and Clayboys handled the exploration problem. The Demon of the Sewers Act is under control. The storyline is holding. Ed breathes a little easier. Then he asks how long he's been out. 10 days. The Sage's sealed grimoire event has already started. And before Ed can fully process that, Jix adds one more thing. Lortel had no choice but to leave for an important negotiation while he was unconscious. Ed is on his feet immediately, telling Jix to get a message to Lortel right now. At Sylvania Academy, the bidding war is already underway. The players are in the room. Princess Fenya Clowell for the Student Association, Lortel for the Elite Merchantry, and a third party no one in the original storyline put there. He enters with the kind of presence that makes a room recalibrate. Crepin Roth Taylor, patriarch of the family, in the flesh. At the luncheon, the principals take each other's measure before the real contest begins. Crepin greets Princess Fina with warmth, apologizes graciously for his family member Ed Roth Taylor's past behavior, and makes clear that Ed's conduct doesn't represent the Roth Taylor name. Fenya responds politely, but she's watching him closely. He reads as noble, measured, even compassionate, his every gesture calibrated to project respect. Her judgmental ability tells her something else entirely. Crepin is not a good man. He turns to Lortel next, confirming she's there on behalf of the Elite Merchantry. Lortel stands, introduces herself, and plays it exactly right. Respectful, composed, giving nothing away she doesn't intend to. Crepin probes with careful words. Lortel answers with careful ones of her own. Lortel keeps it simple. Profit is the only thing she's after. With that, the bidding begins. Each participant writes down a single number, no back and forth, no second chances. The academy is quietly drowning in financial trouble, so they've kept this whole affair discreet. Vice Principal Rachel running the auction, Princess Fenya the only royal in the room. Fenya watches the proceedings with more than casual interest. The sage's sealed grimoire isn't just expensive. It's the kind of item serious researchers would do a lot to get their hands on. She also knows exactly how these sealed bid auctions work. There's no price ceiling, which means the real advantage goes to whoever can guess what the other side is willing to pay. Lortel and Crepin sit across from each other, giving nothing away, each waiting for the other to flinch first. Rachel collects the bids and thanks them both. As she prepares to read the results, Fenya is already running the numbers. Lortel thinks in margins. The highest a comparable book has ever sold is around 8,100 Flen gold coins, so that's probably her ceiling. Go higher and the resale profit disappears. The worry is that Crepin only needs to clear that number by a little to walk away with the grimoire. Rachel stands and begins reading. Crepin's bid comes first, 8,500 Flen gold coins. Fenya isn't surprised. He didn't come here to flip rare books for a living. Then Rachel reads Lortel's number, 9,400 gold coins. The room goes quiet. Lortel didn't just win, she buried him. Crepin's composure finally cracks. He leaves without a word, his attendants trailing behind him, and the look on his face says everything. Lortel, for her part, slips off to a private room to finalize the transaction, calm as ever. Fenya is left standing there, genuinely confused. Lortel spent well past any rational profit margin. That doesn't fit the woman who just spent 10 minutes explaining how much she loves money. Then Fenya thinks back to their tea, the offer to become allies. It clicks. Lortel wasn't buying the grimoire. She was making sure Crepin didn't get it, but Fenya can't quite accept that Lortel did this out of principle. Someone put her up to it. Someone with enough influence to make a merchant absorb a bad deal without blinking. That question is still turning in her mind when something else surfaces. Lortel had mentioned Ed's connection to the Roth-Taylor family, and suddenly Fenya sees it. Ed had been quietly working against his own family this whole time, pushing himself so hard he collapsed. She was the one who pushed for his disownment. The guilt hits fast and hard, though for Ed, that particular disaster may have done him more good than harm. The forest sharpened him in ways the Academy never would have. Back in her quarters, Lortel turns the grimoire over in her hands and does the math. The loss comes out to about 900 gold coins. Not nothing, but not ruinous either. And she knows perfectly well she didn't do it for the margin. Ed asked, and she didn't hesitate. Now she has something he owes her, and she intends to collect. She stretches out and lets herself enjoy the thought. 900 coins for leverage over Ed. As investments go, she's decided it's a bargain. At the campsite, Ed gets the news and visibly relaxes. Jix laughs, telling him he really missed something. Apparently, Lortel's reaction when Elka delivered the update was worth seeing. Ed smiles, but there's a small reservation underneath it. Lortel has a way of getting what she wants, and charm is usually her first tool. He just hopes it was enough this time. The win doesn't fully settle Ed's nerves. He's convinced Crepin Roth-Taylor didn't enter that auction without a reason, and someone like Crepin doesn't walk away from something just because they lost a bid. Then Janica shows up at his hut, out of breath, and clearly relieved he's alive. She apologizes for the rumors spreading around the academy. Apparently, her visible distress over his condition had people talking. Ed waves it off, already knowing the story from Jix, which is exactly the wrong thing to say. Janica rounds on Jix immediately. The detail she didn't want shared, that she'd been running through the academy in tears, is now out, and the rumor mill had turned it into a full heartbreak narrative. She's furious enough to sick her spirit bear on Jix, who gets hauled off looking thoroughly sorry for himself. Jix manages a wave on the way out. Then Mug appears from Janica's hair, which is apparently where he'd been hiding, and he's a mess. He hadn't known how hard Ed was pushing himself, and finding out Ed collapsed under the weight of it hits him hard. He wants to hug Ed but holds back, worried about interfering with his mana, so he latches onto Janica instead and keeps apologizing. Ed finds the whole scene oddly grounding. Then Jix reappears, slightly roughed up, and delivers the number that actually lands. Ed was out for 10 days. Ed's first thought is his food stores. 10 days is more than enough time for everything to spoil, which means starting the gathering process from scratch. Before he can spiral into the logistics of it, Jix and Janica both offer to help. No hesitation. It brings something back to him, the memory of building that first shelter alone, sleeping in the forest with no one around. The contrast isn't lost on him. Janica watches him and notices how worn down he still looks. It pulls her back to a conversation she'd had earlier with her spirit friend Marilda, sitting under one of the forest's stranger trees. Marilda had framed the whole situation as a window of opportunity. Ed was vulnerable, Lortel was scheming, and Janica was running out of time to make a move. Her proposed solution? Dress like a countryside housewife. Janica tried the outfit on, looked uncertain, and Marilda told her it was fine with the confidence of someone who had fully committed to this plan. The coaching session continued from there, with Marilda laying out a step-by-step approach. But Janica kept hesitating, too cautious to commit to any of it, until Marilda finally snapped and asked her directly what she was actually planning to do once she got close to Ed. The answer she got back was not satisfying. Marilda's frustration boiled over into a full lecture. Ed was getting stronger, his rough patch wouldn't last forever, and if Janica waited for the perfect moment, she'd be waiting alone. That finally pushed Janica into action. She whispered her plan to Marilda, who considered it, and gave a reluctant nod. Good enough. That night, after a stew Janica made and a few hours of help from Jix and Janica both, Ed heads to bed. He's still running on empty, and rest is the only thing on his mind. Then the door opens. Janica stands in the doorway, voice soft, telling him he looks exhausted. Ed immediately clocks that she hasn't left, and that she's doing something deliberate with her expression. She walks in slowly, smiling at his question instead of answering it, and sits down beside him on the bed. What follows is less seduction and more emotional ambush. She tells him he needs to stop pretending he's fine, that exhaustion doesn't just live in the body, and she knows exactly how much he's been carrying. Then she says something that cuts through all of it, that when she needed someone, Ed was the one who stayed quiet and close while everyone else rushed in with noise. She wants him to admit he's struggling, not to fix it, just to say it out loud, so he can finally let himself rest. Janica's offer to do the same, to simply be there, quietly, is exactly what breaks him. Ed leans back against the pillow and finally says it out loud, that he's really struggling. Just admitting it seems to lift something off him, and he's asleep almost immediately. By morning, Janica is still beside him, and more importantly, the exhaustion that had been grinding him down is completely gone. He's fully recovered. Whatever she did, it worked. He doesn't get long to appreciate it. Lortel shows up that morning, and the two of them end up sitting together by the river. She seems genuinely glad he's looking better, but she also mentions, almost in passing, that she's been dealing with chronic fatigue herself. Ed's first instinct is that she's playing it up. Then she actually struggles to walk over to him, wincing with every step, and he reconsiders. Once she's settled beside him, he asks the obvious question, why come all the way out to the forest when she's both busy and clearly not well? Lortel waves it off. She has something to tell him. She's converting her merchantry into a full trading company, and she wants Ed at the center of it, not as staff, as co-executive, handling assets, products, and external affairs. She pitches it practically. He'd be at the company every day, just one wall between them. She also offers him a share of her personal assets. In her head, she's already imagining it as something closer to a partnership in every sense of the word. She's still talking, somewhere between business proposal and daydream, when Ed cuts in and asks if she doesn't think this is a little much. Lortel goes quiet. She pulls up her hood, looks at him directly, and tells him he doesn't understand. She already knows what he's thinking, that something's off with her, or that he can't make a serious decision based on the feelings of someone her age. She knows he wants to keep things professional, but he doesn't know what she's been through. She's watched fortunes appear and disappear. She's been betrayed more times than she can count, and somewhere in all of that, she figured out the one thing that actually matters, finding someone who won't leave, even if everything else does. Most people have family or friends as a fallback. She's seen too much to trust that. Her real fear isn't losing money. It's the idea that something happens to her one day, and there's no one there. She asks Ed to stay by her side, no matter what. Ed is visibly moved. Then Lortel laughs and tells him she almost had him. He's furious. She admits, still smiling, that she has a talent for making people waver. It's basically a reflex at this point. They sit together a little longer, and then she takes a breath and says that none of it was actually a lie. Ed tells her he's not going anywhere until he graduates from Sylvania Academy, and that he'll think about the co-executive offer after that. Lortel stands up smiling and says she can wait. Then she pulls out the grimoire document letter. She reminds him that he owes her, and that she intends to collect someday. She waves it at him cheerfully, says it was great seeing him, and walks off. Ed watches her go and immediately feels like he's made a mistake. The debt over the sage's sealed grimoire is real, and now she's holding it like a card she can play whenever she wants. He's stuck, and he knows it. Lortel, for her part, is less composed than she looked. Walking back, she's quietly panicking. She'd planned to be bold, to tell him plainly that he belongs to her now. His serious reaction completely derailed her. She also realizes she forgot to give him his change from the magic engineering products he bought, which makes the idea of going back to see him immediately feel unbearable. She decides to just leave the change at his hut and slip away. Clean, simple, no awkwardness. What she finds instead is Janica, stepping out of the hut, having apparently just woken up there. Both of them freeze. The silence says everything neither of them is ready to. They immediately start demanding answers from each other, and neither is willing to back down. The rivalry between them is instant and ugly, and Ed, still completely unaware, is already the center of a disaster he didn't ask for. He's out by the river, finishing up a bath, blissfully ignorant. Back at the hut, he gets into his routine, chopping logs, managing his energy carefully, while Mug keeps reminding him not to push too hard. Ed actually listens, which for him is progress. With his food and firewood sorted out, courtesy of Jix and Janica, he finally has the breathing room to focus on himself. He sits down with the 3 letters that had been waiting for him since before he collapsed. The first is from Lortel, telling him to stay sharp because neither of them can predict what the elite might do next. The second is from Fina, raising the possibility that Crepin was involved in recent events. But it's the 3rd letter that stops him cold. It's confidential, and it's from Professor Glast, requesting a private meeting after the conference. The problem is Ed never made it to that meeting. His collapse saw to that, and now he has no idea what Glast actually wanted. What he does know, though, is something no one else at the Academy does. In the game, Professor Glast is the final boss of Act 2, and that act has already started. Glast's driving belief is that only a handful of truly gifted people can reshape the world. His goal is to bring back Sylvania, the greatest sage in history, and to do it, he's been developing a spectral magic capable of rewriting natural law itself. The one thing standing between him and that goal is the sage's sealed grimoire. Since the Academy sold it to Lortel to cover its financial problems, Glast takes it by force. Then he goes further. He kidnaps Ayla, a student with a rare magical ability, intending to use her body as a vessel for Sylvania's spirit. The plan is as dangerous as it sounds, and just as unhinged. In the game, Taylor fights through everything Glast throws at him and wins. Glast falls from the magic tower and says something significant before he dies, but Ed can't remember what it was. What he does remember is the trigger. Act 2's final battle begins the moment Ayla is kidnapped. He knows he needs to be ready, and as if on cue, the story cuts to Ayla, awake, alone, locked inside a dark and damp dungeon, with a demon from the underground waterway standing guard. She understands immediately how bad her situation is. The silence makes it worse. She's barely holding herself together when she realizes she's not actually alone. Another voice cuts through the dark, and it's blaming her for getting them into this mess. That's enough to break her composure entirely. Through tears, she snaps back at him, calling him cruel for piling on when she's already miserable, making it very clear she did not want to end up here. The person sharing her dungeon turns out to be Ed Roth Taylor, which was not part of his plan. To explain how he got there, Ed rewinds 3 days. He'd been working on his magic engineering gadgets and hit a wall. His current materials and blueprints simply weren't good enough for what the final battle would demand. Then he remembered something specific from the game. During the 3rd stage of the final act battle, the party enters a secret laboratory packed with valuable blueprints. Taylor handles the middle boss fight there, but Ed is far more interested in what's on the shelves. Going alone would be reckless, so he asked Janica to come with him. Back at the Academy, Professor Glast makes an announcement. 2 students, Adele from Class B and Ayla from Class C, are being moved up to Class A. The Academy needs to make room for exceptional talent. Jix does the math and realizes Class A is now at 5 members, the largest it's been in years under Glast's watch. Ayla may not be the most powerful student, but her effectual magic stats are genuinely unusual. Jix pushes back a little, asking whether the class is purely merit-based. Glast doesn't take the question lightly. He tells Jix plainly that the fastest way to destroy someone's future is to flatter them about vague potential and then leave them without real support. It lands as both a lesson and a warning. For all his intensity, Glast's convictions about talent aren't abstract. They're personal. He has a daughter, Muri, and despite being an ordinary mage, he believed in her completely. That belief shaped everything about how he sees the world. Muri had something to prove. She took on a monster hunting mission before she was ready, and she didn't come back. That loss hollowed Glast out and rebuilt him into something harder. After her death, he threw himself into effectual magic research at Sylvania Academy, not to advance the field, but to resurrect Sylvania herself, the greatest mage who ever lived and the one who created magic in the first place. Grief has a way of turning into obsession, and Glast's version is ambitious, to say the least. At the end of class, Glast almost says something to Lortel, then stops, pulls back, and tells her they'll talk tomorrow instead. Lortel already knows what this is about. He's worried about Sage's sealed grimoire, which she's already bought, and she knows he wants to call it a disgrace, given how critical the grimoire is to magical research. She's not losing sleep over it. The passing ceremony and the official transfer are close enough that whatever he plans to say won't matter. Across campus, Ed is getting ready. The Sage's sealed grimoire connection ceremony is about to begin, which means the final battle of Act 2 is starting. His plan is straightforward. Shadow Taylor through phases 1 to 5 as he fights to rescue Ayla and collect whatever useful items get left behind. He's already mapped out his priorities, specifically 2 items from Phase 3, Glock's Eye and Delheim's Hourglass. Both are made from materials that are nearly impossible to source outside the late-game scenario, so grabbing them now would give him a serious edge going forward. To get Janica on board, he tells her he lost something in the underground waterway and wants her help finding it. He expects her to push back. Dark, cramped spaces aren't exactly inviting. Instead, She agrees without hesitation. Ed feels a small pang of guilt about that. He can tell she genuinely cares, and he's still lying to her face, but he needs her, so he moves on. Before he can leave, Assistant Professor Claire shows up with a message. Professor Glast wants to see him in his office. Ed has no idea why. His best guess is that it's a follow-up to a previous summons he missed when he passed out. He decides to go. He walks in and finds Ayla already there, which immediately puts him on edge. She goes defensive the moment she sees him, still not over the Ophalos Hall incident where he shot an arrow at her. Ed, meanwhile, is confused for a different reason entirely. Ayla is supposed to be kidnapped tomorrow. She should not be standing calmly in a professor's office right now. Something is off. Ed starts scanning the room, looking for anything that might explain the shift. He finds it on Glast's desk, a report written by Claire, documenting her observations of Ed and her investigation into the Ophalos Hall incident. The picture snaps into focus. Glast knows what Ed can do, and he may have already worked out what Ed actually did. He's still processing that when the office door opens and Glast walks in. Ed's hand goes to his dagger before he even thinks about it. Ayla, startled, screams and bolts toward the professor. Then the situation flips entirely. Glast isn't the one who needs protecting. He's the final boss of Act 2 and he's done pretending otherwise. He traps Ayla in a time prison without breaking stride. Ed throws his dagger and calls on Mug to set off an explosion, a fast, reasonable response. Glast blocks it without much effort and actually compliments Ed on his speed and his ability to read the room so quickly. The compliment doesn't come with any mercy attached. From cover, Ed tries to negotiate. He offers to stay out of it entirely if Glast only needs Ayla. Glast isn't interested. He's already seen enough of Ed's capabilities to know he's a loose end, and he doesn't leave those. Ed runs the math. Even if he escapes now, Glast will keep coming, and that disrupts everything. But if he gets captured, there's a good chance he ends up exactly where he's been trying to go, the secret laboratory. He makes his call and surrenders. Glast looks at him and delivers his verdict. Ed is a product of effort, not talent. Capable, resourceful, but fundamentally limited in Glast's view. Looking at him, Glast sees echoes of his daughter. As Ed is locked into the time prison, Mug slips quietly out of his pocket and disappears from the office undetected. Mug makes it to the hut just as Janica is going about her afternoon, completely in the dark about what's happened to Ed. The story then pulls back to give us something quieter, the written memoirs of an old man who spent his life traveling the southern continents, chasing magical truths. Most of what he wrote circles back to one person, his late master Sylvania, one of the greatest mages of her time, gone far too soon. In his memory, she never aged, and for the rest of his life, he carried the quiet, impossible wish to see her face one more time, knowing full well that some things once lost, stay lost. So instead of chasing what he couldn't have, he did the next best thing. He found a young apprentice and poured everything he knew into her. On his deathbed, he laid Sylvania's hat over his life's work. His final words in the book were a dedication to his apprentice, Lucy Marcel. In the game's story, that old man is Glocked, and he meets his end the way few characters do. Not fighting it, not mourning it, but genuinely at peace with it. His apprentice Lucy, who calls him grandfather, has no choice but to let him go. The loss still cuts. Ed finds himself wondering whether that kind of wound ever really closes, or if it just becomes part of her. The one small thing that keeps Lucy grounded is the beef jerky she keeps from Ed's hut. So when she climbs down from the roof to refill her empty pouch, the timing couldn't be worse, because Janica is standing right there, radiating a deep, sinister purple aura, with Mug already talking to her. Across the city at Trix Hall, the Academy's main conference room, the Sage's sealed grimoire passing ceremony is underway. The Merchantry elite and Academy faculty have gathered, and Lortel stands at the front, ready to receive the grimoire from Principal Obol Forsis. Looking at him, her mind drifts to Kreppenroth Taylor. Same age, completely different energy. She thinks back to after the bidding closed, when Kreppen pulled her aside and pushed her to hand the grimoire directly to him. She came back with 12,000 gold coins. He didn't flinch. But before walking away, he gave her something worth more than the gold. The information that her father, Elite Ketchon, had already hired mercenaries and sent them towards Sylvania. Kreppen is not a pleasant person, but useful is useful. Standing there holding the grimoire, Lortel turns the decision over in her mind. Take the clean profit, or use this as a way to get closer to Ed. The small smile that crosses her face suggests she already knows which way she's leaning. Then Professor Glast moves. He throws up a spectral barrier that cuts everyone off from the grimoire, summons two enormous spirits to force Principal Obol and Lortel back, and walks out of the hall with the grimoire before anyone can react. With that, the path is clear. No deviations, no interference. Act 2's final scene begins. In Glast's secret laboratory, Ed is locked in a cell with Ayla, who is furious and making sure he knows it. She hasn't forgiven the arrow. Before Ed can do much about the situation, Coombe appears. He's Glast's colleague in Spectral Studies, and his message is simple. They're lucky they're not on a lab table, so they should keep quiet and not do anything that wakes up whatever is guarding the door. Ed takes that in stride. Coombe, a little thrown by how unbothered Ed seems, tells them to sit still and stay out of trouble. He'll be watching. Ed leans back and waits. The plan is straightforward. Taylor will show up, there'll be a rescue, and Ed intends to use the chaos to grab every magic engineering recipe and piece of equipment he can carry before slipping out quietly. In the meantime, he tries to make conversation with Ayla. She shuts him down every time. Ed tries the reasonable approach. No hard feelings, and if he'd actually wanted to hurt her, she'd know it. That logic does not land the way he intended. She calls him a liar and keeps going. Eventually, Ed tells her flatly to stop and just wait for Taylor. Then, after a beat, he apologizes and explains that what he did came from his own situation, not from anything personal against her. Ayla has apparently never heard Ed apologize before. She goes quiet. Then Mug shows up in tears, asking if Ed is alright. Ed grabs him immediately. Finally, someone in this cell he can actually talk to. Ayla, noticing that Ed has a spirit companion, suggests Mug go get help. Mug informs them with some excitement that he's already handled it. Janica knows, and Lucy is on her way. Ed's relief evaporates on the spot. Lucy coming here is not part of the plan. It is, in fact, the opposite of the plan. Mug's excitement about Lucy earns him a swift smack from Ed, sending him tumbling across the cell. When Cum comes over to check on the noise, Ed warns him plainly, "Let them go, or this gets ugly." Cum finds that funny enough to walk away. He shouldn't have turned his back. Mug had already lifted the dungeon keys while Cum was distracted, and Ed wastes no time getting the cell open. Ayla wants to move with him, but Ed talks her into staying put. Her leg is in no shape for what's outside, and he needs to move fast. She argues, then gives in. Ed's priority is simple: find Lucy before Lucy finds the lab. Among players who knew the game well, Lucy was the kind of variable you built your entire strategy around avoiding. Whatever she touches, the scenario changes. With his future riding on how this plays out, Ed runs. Back at Ophilus Hall, Taylor shows up at Jick's room, bruised, worn down, and asking for help getting Ayla out. He's lost Glast's trail since Trick's Hall, so Jick and his companions head into the underground waterway to pick it back up. At the same time, Ed is moving through the lab in reverse, retracing the path he came in on. He finds it almost funny. Experiencing the final scenario backwards wasn't exactly in the original script, but it works in his favor. The monsters are still contained, which means the route is cleaner than it should be. What isn't clean is the thought of Lucy crossing paths with Professor Glast. That particular meeting doesn't end well for anyone. Ed keeps moving. Eventually, he reaches the secret library where Reyna, a banshee and the library's boss, is on guard. He knows her patterns well enough to know he doesn't want to fight her. That fight belongs to Taylor, who needs the experience from taking down both Reyna and Coom to be ready for what comes next. So Ed slips through quietly, picking up the magical tools and engineering recipes he needs while staying out of Reyna's line of sight. Mug signals the timing. They move carefully. Then the ground shakes. The earthquake is enough. Reyna's attention snaps to them immediately, and the moment she locks on, there's no recovering the situation. Both Ed and Mug know it. 30 minutes earlier, back at Trick's Hall, Principal Obel finishes putting down the giants Glast summoned, and the immediate crisis is over. Lortel watches in disbelief as she processes what just happened. Glast stole the grimoire in front of the Academy's top faculty and walked out. Obel takes responsibility and promises to get it back, but his tone makes clear he's worried about what Glast is actually planning. He lays it out plainly. There are 3 things magic absolutely does not touch: immortality, resurrection, and time. All 3 break something fundamental: natural law, the flow of time, human fate. Lortel connects the pieces herself. Glast's grief over his daughter, his fixation on the legendary mage Sylvania. If he's after any of the 3, resurrection is the obvious answer. Before Obel can press her further, a faculty member rushes in. Taylor has been spotted chasing Glast into the underground waterway, and students have been taken, including Ayla and Ed. That last name stops Lortel cold. She trusts Obel to handle it. He's the most powerful mage alive, and he gave his word. The sensible move is to wait. She's almost convinced herself of that when she glances out the window and sees something enormous moving in the distance. She grabs binoculars. Through them, the entrance to the underground waterway, and Janica, riding her spirit dragon straight toward it. That settles it. Lortel calls her team to action. They're going in. Down in the waterway, Janica has already found Dorothy, a third-year student and one of Glast's people. She grabs her for answers, but Tarkin's presence does most of the work. One look at the massive growling fire dragon, and Dorothy passes out entirely. Janica sighs, pieces together what she can from what Dorothy managed to say before going under, and drapes something over Dorothy's face. Less out of kindness, more out of mild embarrassment at the situation. That's when Lortel arrives, greeting her with exactly the kind of cheerful energy the moment doesn't call for. Lortel takes one look at Janica's spirits and understands immediately. Janica will level the entire waterway if that's what it takes to get Ed out. That realization is immediately followed by a less noble one. What happens if Janica succeeds, and Ed ends up falling for her because of it? Lortel decides that outcome is unacceptable. She walks up to Janica with a smooth smile and mentions, almost offhandedly, that Ed's already been rescued and is back at his hut. She should probably go check on him. Janica doesn't buy it for a second. She points out, calmly and correctly, that she arrived first and saw no one come out. The lie collapses before it even lands. While the two of them bicker, Janica mentions she did try to bring backup. She asked Lucy, who yawned, turned around, and left. So here they are. With no better option, they split up and head in opposite directions, both racing to find Ed first. The stakes are the same for both of them, and neither is pretending otherwise. Meanwhile, in the secret library where Ed and Mug are still cornered by Raina, the ceiling caves in. Raina ends up buried under the rubble, and dropping down through the hole, mid-yawn, is Lucy, who explains she got bored and figured she'd come help. Ed stares at her and immediately understands that things just got significantly more complicated. Elsewhere, Principal Obel and an old friend watch the sunset and debate whether to step in. Obel leans toward letting the students handle it. They're the future of Sylvania Academy, and moments like this are how they grow. His friend isn't so sure. He wonders if it's fair to keep piling pressure on them. He acknowledges this is the strongest generation the Academy has seen in a long time. Students like Taylor and Jix don't come around often. Over the years, many have risen to meet the Academy's challenges and proven themselves. He and Obel have high hopes for all of them. Obel listens, and something in him stirs. He can feel it. Something bigger is coming. Harder than anything the students have faced yet. The kind of thing that doesn't just test limits, it redefines them. Back underground, Lucy is sitting on top of the rubble pile, still yawning, asking Ed if he has any beef jerky. He tells her he doesn't. She looks genuinely devastated and starts scouting for somewhere to nap. Ed grabs her shoulder before she can. He needs to think. Lucy's arrival is a problem, but it's also a variable he can work with. By now, Janica and Lortel should be moving through the hall, which means he needs to intercept them before they reach the final stage. More importantly, he cannot let Lucy anywhere near Glassed. If she gets there first, it's over. Not in the dramatic sense, in the wrong ending sense. So he does what works. He remembers something Janica once told him. Staying close to someone keeps you safe. He uses that exact logic on Lucy, promises her beef jerky on the way out, and gets her to agree to stick with him. It's a small miracle. The new plan: grab everything useful from the library, find Janica and Lortel, and get out, leaving the rest of the scenario for Taylor. As they move, Lucy hits the attacking bats with her ignition spell and clears the path in seconds. Ed watches and is genuinely stunned by the scale of it. He tries to nudge her toward restraint, quietly hoping she leaves something for Taylor to actually fight. On the other side of the waterway, Lortel is making fast progress. Where Janica navigates by spirit sense, Lortel just knows how to read a path, and as she moves through the tunnels, something shifts in her, a feeling she doesn't quite recognize. For once, she's not thinking about money or leverage or getting ahead. She actually wants Ed to be okay. She stops at a concealed wall with a spell on it, listens, and then the wall explodes outward. Ed steps through, carrying Lucy on his back and a load of advanced magic equipment in his arms. The relief that hits Lortel is immediate and genuine. Ed, without missing a beat, hands her a stack of the gear to carry. Lortel takes it, but her eyes are on Lucy, draped across Ed's back like it's the most natural thing in the world, and that burns. Lortel had been the one making moves, taking initiative, closing distance, while Janica held back and waited. She'd done everything right, and somehow Ed is still carrying someone else. Lortel had put in the work. Every move, every moment, she'd been deliberate about it. And then Lucy shows up on Ed's back like it means nothing, and suddenly all of that feels like it counted for less than she thought. The frustration spills out before she can stop it, and she calls his name with enough heat that it's clear she's not just annoyed. She doesn't get to finish the thought. Ed pulls her close, looks her dead in the eyes, and tells her she's the one he trusts most. Full stop. Lortel goes completely still. Whatever she was about to say is gone. The blush hits fast. The anger dissolves even faster, and for a moment she's just standing there trying to figure out what to do with the fact that it actually worked. Not because she pushed for it, but because he meant it. She hadn't seen that coming. She barely has time to sit with it before one of her crew breaks the moment entirely, rushing over with news that something serious is happening nearby. The story doesn't wait. Meanwhile, Taylor's group has made it into the underground waterway. Clebius, true to form, is already miserable about it, muttering about leaving, questioning why they're even here for Ed Roth on top of everything else. Elvira shuts him up the efficient way. Taylor takes the gentler approach, reminding him that Ayla is worth it and asking him to hold it together. Deeper in, Adele raises a finger with the kind of dramatic flair that only works because she's usually right. She warns them something dangerous is just ahead. The explosion that follows is basically her punctuation. Out of it comes Tarkin, the fiery dragon spirit, carrying Miss Claire. Janica is demanding to know where Professor Glassed is. Claire, for her part, handles the interrogation the same way Dorothy did. She faints. Janica spots Taylor's group and smiles. Taylor's group does not smile back. they go defensive immediately. Janica looks genuinely confused. Taylor doesn't know who she is, and in a place like this, that's reason enough to treat her as a threat. Everyone's coiled and ready, except Jix, who just waves at her like they're old friends. Taylor is about to commit to the fight when Jix steps in. Something feels off to him. Before it goes any further, a voice cuts through and tells everyone to stop. Ed and Lortel come in from another direction. Taylor goes still. He looks at the three of them, Ed, Janica, Lortel, and does the math. It's not a calculation that ends well for his group. He knows it immediately. He thinks back to Ophelis Hall, where Ed, working with nothing but basic magic and a bow, had managed to hold Taylor's entire group at a standstill. That was then. Ed now looks like a different problem altogether. Taylor quietly accepts that this is not a fight he wins. Then Ed walks over and taps him on the shoulder. He tells Taylor to stay focused. Ayla, Glast, the main mission. Ed will handle the side threats, specifically the elite Ketchuln. The timing lands hard. Lortel's crew member arrives with the full picture. The elite Ketchuln has reached Archon Island, and he brought mercenaries. With Lortel's trading company members left behind and no one to organize them, the elite had worked through them without much resistance. Ed absorbs this without panic. In the game, the elite Ketchuln was the mid-boss of Act 2, one that hadn't been properly dealt with the first time around. That oversight had consequences, but Ed has something the elite doesn't know about, the magic tool that lets him see how the game is supposed to go. He checks it. The story is still on track. The story. Act 2 is closing in. Taylor is moving through the main plot, and Ed's role is clear. Take out the mid-boss. Keep the timeline intact. He turns back to Taylor, says what needs to be said, and sends him off with something close to genuine confidence in him. Taylor is the main character of this story. What's ahead of him will be harder than anything Ed is walking into. Ed knows that, and he leaves anyway, trusting Taylor to handle his part. Ed doesn't waste time. He heads straight for the trading company, working on the assumption that elite Ketchuln will go there first, looking for evidence that ties Lortel to the armor sale that cost him his position. But mid-sprint, Janica pulls everyone to a stop. Ed pushes back. They need to move. Janica doesn't budge. She reminds him that he already collapsed once and barely made it out of Glast's prison, and now he wants to run toward another fight. There are tears in her eyes when she tells him this isn't his problem to solve. He knows she's right, technically, but he also knows what happens if elite Ketchuln isn't dealt with. The safe ending he's been carefully working towards starts to fall apart, and he's going to need both Janica and Lortel to pull this off anyway. Lortel backs Janica up. She tells Ed this mess is her fault, not his, and that he should be somewhere safe instead of throwing himself into it. Ed finds it quietly touching, the two of them agreeing on something, even if just for a moment, but he's not resting. He thanks them, then tells them plainly that Lortel's problem isn't someone else's problem to him. That lands harder than he expected. Both of them go still. The whole atmosphere shifts. Ed, slightly mortified by how that came out, tells them to keep running. As they go, he's already cringing at his own wording. He's never been great at saying things the way he means them. Janica, noticing the look on his face, steps in to smooth it over, pointing out that she agrees with him for practical reasons. If Elite takes the trading company, Ed's contract collapses and his magic tool supply goes with it. Ed is genuinely impressed. That's exactly the kind of clean logic he needed and couldn't produce himself. Lortel, meanwhile, says nothing. She's somewhere else entirely, still turning his words over in her head. They're almost at the exit when Ed registers the scale of destruction ahead. His first thought is Taylor. His second thought, after Janica quietly admits it was her, an accident, she insists, and Dorothy passed out in the process, is that he really needs to stop underestimating her. She's clearly worried he'll think badly of her for it. He doesn't. A crew member confirms the exit is close and that a carriage is waiting outside to take them to the association building where Lortel's staff is holding position. It sounds like a plan. Then they step outside. The carriage is wreckage. Lortel's crew members are dead, and Elite Ketchuln is standing in the middle of it, waiting. Lortel keeps her composure, throwing a cool remark his way about him arriving earlier than expected. Elite finds that amusing. He explains that he's the one who taught her how to keep company records clean. No evidence, no trail. This time, he used that same knowledge against her. He found a gap in her personnel management, bribed one of her own crew members, and walked them all into this. He watches her process the betrayal and twist the knife. He tells her she's finally perfected the smile she wears when someone sells her out, and that it's a shame he'll have to ruin it getting her to confess. Then he snaps his fingers, and the beaten crew members get back up. The zombified crew swarms them immediately. Lortel, not missing a beat, throws it back at Elite, pointing out that he's never once fought his own battles, always hiding behind hired muscle. Elite smiles and tells her that this time, he's brought the best mercenaries on the continent. His orders are simple. Kill everyone, take Lortel alive. Arrows come in fast. Janica gets a wind spell up just in time, scattering the volley before it connects. She reads the mercenaries' movements and tells everyone to stay sharp. These aren't amateurs. Elite already knows Janica is the problem. Spirit successors are difficult to pin down, and he came prepared. He produces Belarus's Prejudice, a legendary item, and activates it. The mana in the surrounding area begins to collapse inward, suppressed. Janica's advantage just got a lot smaller. Ed knows exactly what Belarus's Prejudice is, and exactly what's wrong with it. The activation window is slow and visible. In theory, that's exploitable. In practice, their group is mostly mages, and veteran mercenaries don't give mages room to breathe. Lortel makes the stakes plain. Elite came in knowing everything about them. If that item goes live, the fight is already over. Elite doesn't seem bothered by the question of academy consequences. His answer is essentially that losing his life would be worse, which is hard to argue with. Ed watches the situation and feels something close to regret. He left this man alive earlier, a small decision that barely registered at the time, and now that decision has compounded into something genuinely dangerous. Elite isn't a great villain because he's powerful. He's dangerous because Ed gave him time to become one. Still, Ed has one thing working in his favor. He knows how this story ends. Elite loses. That's not hope, that's the script. Ed just has to get there. So he looks at the mercenaries blocking every angle and he gets an idea. He crouches down and nudges the person he's been carrying this whole time. Lucy, he tells her, it's time. Lucy's response is to complain about the noise. Then she opens her eyes, raises her hand, and the battlefield rearranges itself. Mercenaries go airborne. The ones still standing don't stay standing long. This is Lucy, technically a student, functionally a catastrophe, and currently the most useful person in the fight by a significant margin. While the chaos settles, the scene shifts briefly to a small cabin that belonged to Glock. His travel journal, written near the end of his life, was never widely read. In it, he wrote about Lucy with a mixture of awe and worry. He saw her talent clearly, the blessing from the stars, the raw ability that most mages spend lifetimes chasing. But he warned her not to let those gifts make her lazy, and not to let her power make her isolated. Before he finished, he asked 3 things of her. Never kill with her magic, avoid anything that might put blood on her hands even by accident, and live quietly as a student at Sylvania Academy. Back in the present, the veteran mercenaries, people who had walked through genuine danger their entire careers, are terrified. Not rattled, terrified. They've never felt anything like this. Even Elite, who had been running the whole encounter with cold confidence, starts shouting. He orders his men to fight her. One of them actually tries, charging in with a sword. Lucy snaps her fingers and he's gone. The rest don't need to see it twice. They run, leaving Elite standing alone. Elite, now very much not in control, falls back on threats. He warns Lucy that he'll use the magic tool if she gets any closer. Then Lucy asks simply if he's the one in charge, and the weight of her presence alone drops him to the ground. She's about to end it when Ed steps in and signals her to stop. Elite is finished. There's nothing left to prove. Then the ground moves. A massive earthquake rolls through, and in the sky 7 stars align in a straight line. Ed knows what this means immediately. Glast has pushed his magic past the point of natural law. The magical realm is descending. Act 2's final battle has begun. Ed thinks of Taylor, underground, tested, now ready, and feels something loosen in his chest. The story is on track. Things are moving the way they should. Then he sees Lucy flying toward the magical realm. She's watching the towers pull magic from the air, and something in her expression says she understands what that means. Reviving the dead might actually be possible. Ed's relief evaporates. He knows this moment. In the original game, Lucy sleeps through the whole event on a rooftop. But if a player wakes her early and brings her to Glast, Glast makes her an offer. He can bring back Glocked, and Lucy, faced with that, turns. She doesn't just stop helping. She destroys everyone, the hero included. No exceptions, no workarounds. There is no version of that fight that ends well. Ed woke her up. He brought her here. And now she's heading straight toward the one person who knows exactly what to say to her. Ed's first fear is that he caused all of this. His escape, his kidnapping. Any of it could have been the nudge that set Lucy on this exact path. But before that spiral goes too far, Elite makes his move. He activates his legendary magic tool to suppress Lucy's mana, and with her briefly weakened, he sends a mercenary at Ed. It's a reasonable play. It just doesn't work. Ed stays calm, uses his Windblade magic, and puts the attacker down without much ceremony. Elite looks stunned. Apparently he hadn't accounted for Ed actually being competent. Then Lucy's mana surges back and the tool shatters completely. That's the end of Elite's options. He drops to his knees and begs. Lucy, not in a forgiving mood, is ready to finish it. Ed steps between them. He doesn't argue with her anger. He just asks her to stop and reminds her that killing someone, even someone who deserves it, isn't the answer. The words land differently than they might from anyone else, because they're essentially Glock's words. The same advice her mentor gave her about keeping her hands clean. It works. Lucy pulls back, spares Elite, and shifts her focus back to the realm. When she moves to leave, Ed asks where she's going. She's vague about it, so he tries a different angle, asking whether she'll regret whatever she's about to do. Lucy thinks of Glock's final message to her. Be strong, and accept that what's gone is gone. He spent his life writing for her, and his last instruction was to move forward. She tells Ed she won't regret it, and flies off into the sky. With Lucy gone, the situation wraps up quickly. Janica manages the mercenaries' retreat. Lortel takes Elite into custody, and Ed, body worn out, climbs to the top of Trick's hall. He finds Lucy on the roof, sitting alone, watching the realm. He sits beside her without making a thing of it. And he thinks about Glocked, how the man built the scholarship Ed is currently on, how he gave away everything he had to the academy despite living simply, how Glocked Hall itself, the one Janica leveled back in Act 1, was built in his name. Every corner of this place carries his fingerprints. For Lucy, the academy isn't just a school, it's a monument to someone she lost. Then Lucy breaks the silence by asking if he has any beef jerky left. He doesn't. She accepts this with the same quiet dignity she's brought to everything else tonight. He asks what she's doing up here. She says she's thinking about the old days, watching The Realm, and then, slowly, she starts to talk. She used to cry a lot, she says. There was plenty to cry about, but at some point the sadness faded. Not because the pain healed, but because enough time had passed. Glocked has been gone a long time, and even if she used spectral magic to bring him back, he'd only leave again. He was already at peace with dying. She half smiles at the thought. If she revived him, he'd probably be annoyed about it, die again on principle, and find a way to scold her from the afterlife. Then she gets to the real thing. Resurrecting Glocked, a mage who gave his whole life to magic, who chose his path with full awareness, would be an insult to everything he stood for. She calls herself selfish for ever wanting it. The desire to bring him back was never about him. It was about her. Ed listens and doesn't try to fix it. Ed checks in on Lucy, not intrusively, just carefully. Her decision to let Glocked go feels too fresh, and he knows better than most what it looks like when someone makes a choice they're not ready to keep. But Lucy doesn't deflect or bargain for snacks this time. She just leans her head against his shoulder, quietly. That says more than anything she could have said out loud. Ed doesn't move. He just lets her have it. Because somewhere between everything she told him tonight, Lucy crossed a line she'd been standing at for a long time. The one where you stop fighting what's already gone. The dead are dead. What's lost is lost. She knows that now, and she's starting to build something over the wound instead of picking at it. They sit together under the night sky, not saying anything. The stars are out. For once, things feel still. That stillness doesn't last long. On the other side of the island, Taylor and his team have caught up to Professor Glast, and what's waiting for them is not a conversation. A massive golem towers over the scene, Glast's effectual magic given physical form, with Ayla unconscious and trapped inside it, seconds away from being sacrificed. The final battle is here. Jix and the others open with everything they have, throwing magic at the golem to crack it open while Taylor pushes toward Ayla. Glast steps in his way, and as they fight, Glast's mind drifts back. The quiet life he built. Ancient texts, lesson plans, tea with Dorothy and Miss Claire, and Principal Obel. Seasons turning outside a window he barely looked through. A man completely absorbed in his work. It looked like peace from the outside. But one thing never left him. His daughter Maury died, and that grief became the engine for everything he's done since. While Taylor presses forward, Jix and Elvira pull the golem's attention until Glast locks them both in a time prison, freezing them mid-motion. Jix manages to get one word out before the spell takes hold. Dodge. Taylor moves just in time. He doesn't stop. He lines up a slash strike and brings the golem down. The destruction unravels everything Glast built. The frozen time releases, Jix and Elvira snap back into motion, and Ayla is free. Glast tries to regroup, but Jix hits him with an ice spell before he can, and Taylor closes the gap. One final blow. It's over. Glast doesn't fight what comes next. He falls from the building and teleports away, not to escape, but to disappear. He ends up in a quiet forest, leaning against a tree, bleeding, and done. He's thinking about Muri when he opens his eyes and finds Ed standing in front of him. Ed has a question. Whatever it is, it couldn't wait. By the time things settle, Lortel has made it back. Her adoptive father Elite secured, the immediate threat's gone. She heads to meet Ed near the underground waterway and finds him there with Lucy attached to his coat sleeve like a barnacle. Lortel clocks that immediately, and her expression shifts just slightly. Before anyone can address it, Dorothy and Assistant Professor Claire come up from the waterway, and the moment they see Janica standing there with Tarkin, both of them scream. Janica, unbothered, walks over to check on Ed. Janica's spirit friends have been busy. They've picked up reports of spectral magic being used somewhere in the forest, and when Tarkin traces the unusual energy back to the magic tower, the group doesn't need long to connect the dots. Spectral magic, a disgraced professor, unfinished business. It has Glast written all over it. Ed would rather not get involved. But his run-in with Elite is still fresh, and he knows better than anyone what happens when you leave a threat half-resolved. If Glast is resurfacing, better to deal with it now than regret it later. They find him in the forest, and the sight stops both Janica and Lortel cold. Glast is in rough shape, wounds open, blood still flowing, barely holding himself upright against a tree. Whatever he attempted, it cost him nearly everything. When they ask what he's doing out here, he says he's admiring the moon. Ed doesn't laugh. He tells Glast plainly that he must have known forbidden magic would end like this. Glast admits it. He knew. What he didn't expect was being taken down by students. He looks at Ed and says he turned out to be a far better student than he'd given him credit for. The problem being that he figured that out too late. Ed takes the opening. He asks the question that's been sitting with him since the beginning. Why kidnap him at all? Glast explains. He'd been impressed by Ed's talent and had planned to fold him into his schemes. But when Glast collapsed from overwork, everything fell apart. He'd taken Ed as a precaution, intending to make him an offer, and by the time he came back for him, Ed was already gone. He says he's paying for his sins with his life, and that it's not a bad deal. Then, quieter, he admits he misses his daughter, Muir. 17 years with her, and somehow he'd forgotten they weren't lonely years at all. Ed lets him sit with that for a moment, then speaks up. He brings up Claire, who admired Glass despite every reason not to. To her, he wasn't just a professor. He was the sharpest mind she'd ever encountered. And Dorothy, she looked up to him as a mentor, someone she genuinely respected. Ed's point is simple. Glass may have lost his way and put lives at risk, but his existence still meant something to people. Sitting here and calling himself a man who will die alone isn't humility. It's an insult to everyone he actually reached. Glass listens. Then he smiles, faintly, and takes off his glasses. With what's left of his strength, he holds out a key. It's to his personal library. Legendary rank crafting formulas, years of accumulated knowledge. Ed hesitates, genuinely caught off guard, and asks why he'd hand over something like that. Glass tells him to be grateful. Then, with the dry humor of a man who has nothing left to lose, he tells Ed to clean up the mess he made before the Academy's investigation team shows up. His last words are for Lucy, a quiet piece of advice to look around herself every once in a while. Then he closes his eyes. He looks almost peaceful, resting beneath the moonlit Zelkova tree. Ed, Lucy, Janica, and Lortel stand there in silence, each of them holding something complicated about a man who had been their enemy, and somewhere along the way, something else entirely. The next morning, Ed is called to the dean's office. The dean wants answers. Why Glass targeted Ed, how he escaped without Ayla, and what exactly his involvement with Taylor's group was. Ed walks him through all of it. Janica, Lortel, the choices he made under pressure. The dean listens. Then he pauses, and with a measured look, notes that Ed has a habit of knowing quite a lot for someone who claims to know very little. But after reviewing Ed's track record, the Ophalis Hall incident, the Glass situation, he sets the suspicion aside. He apologizes for the Academy's failures and the position Ed was put in, and tells him he's earned a reward. The dean doesn't just review the incident. He pulls out Ed's full academic record. Whatever conclusion he's drawing, it goes beyond the events of the past few days. Ed is dismissed shortly after, and Janica is waiting for him outside. All smiles, asking if he's all right. Ed turns the question back on her. Janica waves him off. Minor rashes, nothing serious. But her spirit bird whispers something in her ear, and suddenly she's the one pressing him, asking if he's really okay or just pretending to be. Ed takes a moment, then tells her what's been sitting with him. He noticed, during everything that happened, that Janica is always the one pushing herself hardest for others, and always the one who ends up paying for it. He apologizes for not seeing that sooner. Janica starts to brush it off with a smile, then stops herself and comes clean. She's not hurt at all. The injuries were a performance, designed specifically to get his attention. Ed absorbs this, then responds with something that catches her completely off guard. Starting next semester, he'll be living in Dex's hall, same building as her. The dean's reward included actual student housing, which means the wilderness chapter of Ed's life is officially over. Janica's reaction is immediate and genuine. She's thrilled. Ed, for his part, heads back to his hut with something between relief and mild sentimentality. He's gotten used to the place, strange as that is. He's almost at the door when Lucy drops out of the sky and lands directly in front of him. We cut to Y. In a dream, Lucy finds herself not on Arkan Island, but in the northern Ramelin mountain range, where she grew up. She decides to visit her old house, maybe just to see her father's face. What she finds instead is a man in a rocking chair surrounded by cobwebs, and when he turns around, his face is wrong. He asks her why she didn't save him when she had the chance. She recognizes it for what it is, and wakes up. Her maid arrives to get her ready for school. Lucy doesn't respond. Instead, she casts high-level spatial magic and goes directly to the northern forest. No explanation, just an urgent pull she can't quite name. She lands on the roof of Ed's cabin and watches him walk back from the dean's office. Something about seeing him there settles something in her. Then she overhears him mention that his camping days are ending, loses her footing, and falls off the roof. Elsewhere, Professor Flurbin is in the middle of a lecture on cat-type familiars. His point, cats are unpredictable by design. Show too much interest and they pull away. Stop paying attention and suddenly they won't leave you alone. The best strategy, he tells his students, is deliberate indifference. The women in the class note, not entirely wrong, that this sounds harder than actual dating. The ecology course on cat creatures is apparently one of the more popular offerings at the academy. Most students do well in it. Ed started near the bottom of the rankings, then quietly outworked everyone until his notes were the best in the class. After the lecture, Flurbin calls Ed into his office and brings up the Academy's scholarship program, academic work in exchange for tuition discounts. He pitches it casually while handling his snake. When Ed asks what the work actually involves, Flurbin is vague in the way people are when they know the answer isn't appealing. Various academic duties, including assisting Professor Claire. Claire already has a capable assistant in Annis, but the volume of work, semester-end evaluations, academic society agendas, freshman assignment tests, has outpaced what one person can manage. Flurbin adds, almost as an afterthought, that Ed should go easy on the freshmen. Ed realizes, as the professor keeps talking, that someone he knows is going to be in that incoming class. Meanwhile, Lortel is examining the sage's sealed grimoire. The The magical resonance coming off it is significant enough that she's reconsidering her original plan to sell it to Crepin Roth-Taylor, the head of the Roth-Taylor family, especially given how desperately Ed asked her not to let Crepin have it. She's a businesswoman, and she knows she should be more ruthless about this. But then she looks again at Ed's message, where he promised he'd do anything she asked if she could get him the grimoire's purchase certificate. That shifts things. She also thinks about signing up for a special winter break class. Janica, Ed, and Lucy will all be occupied, and she'd rather stay busy than not. She reaches for the documents. Then she stops. Something about the whole situation doesn't sit right, and she can't quite push past it. Back at the cabin, Lucy points out they're running low on firewood, and wants to know why Ed hasn't been hunting. He's caught off guard. This kind of practical observation isn't really her style. She's right, though. He's been distracted because he's seriously considering a move to Dex Hall. If that happens, he and Lucy won't cross paths nearly as much. He's still turning it over in his head when Janica shows up. A canceled class giving her an unexpected afternoon off. She drops into a seat, nudges Lucy aside, and gets straight to the point. Winter break is coming. The camp won't be an option much longer, so she's making the most of the time left. She admits she genuinely loves it there, and losing it stings a little. Then she pivots to Ed. If he does move to Dex Hall, she wants him to call her. She can help him settle in, show him around, make sure they still eat together. She has the whole thing mapped out. While she's talking, Ed quietly pulls out the key Professor Glass left him before he died. He's been putting it off long enough. The secret vault in the library. It's time. He's still thinking it through when Janica slides an application form across to him, warning that late submissions don't always make the cut. He thanks her, genuinely surprised by the gesture, and she tells him to fill it out right there with her. That's when Lucy steps between them. She signals Janica to stop, then looks at Ed and tells him plainly, "Don't go to Dex Hall." And just like that, the rivalry is official. It doesn't take long to become a pattern. While Janica works with Ed on improving his spirit and mana resonance, she keeps catching Lucy staring at her and can't figure out what she did wrong. The staring continues. So does the clinging. Lucy follows Ed everywhere, and her hostility toward Janica is constant, though it reads less like anger and more like something closer to anxiety. Meanwhile, Ed hits a wall with intermediate magic. He's been at it all day, and the basics still aren't clicking. Lucy finds him and asks what he's planning once she heads off. He mentions a quick errand and the fireplace, the kind of small inconvenience that Dex Hall would eliminate entirely. Then, without much build-up, she kneels and proposes they go together. So they do. The two of them find a hidden entrance through the top of the school library, and Ed uses a rope to get down. He asks why she came along to a place like this. She doesn't answer directly, just argues she could have helped with the magic. He turns her down. He needs to know how to manage this himself because he can't bring everything in one trip. They find the vault, and Ed tries the key. It opens. Light spills out, and what's inside stops him cold. Climbing back out, Ed pieces it together, and the timing lines up with Lortel's delivery of the magic engineering item he ordered. What they found is a legendary rank magic tool, Glast's Golden Phoenix Ring. It distorts the timeline, pulling the magical ability Ed will have in the future into the present. In practical terms, he can use high-level magic right now. The catch is proportional. The more he borrows, the longer he'll be out of commission afterward. He decides it's not something to reach for casually, only when he's genuinely out of options. There's another use, though. Spirit contracts. Janica can command a vast number of spirits because her magic reserves are enormous. Ed, as a beginner, has 1 or 2 slots and has to work just to communicate with low-ranked spirits. Temporarily inflating his maximum magic capacity could let him contract with a high-ranking spirit, though what risks that carries, he's not entirely sure yet. Lucy wonders aloud why Glass didn't use something like this himself, given that he clearly had the time to build it. Ed reminds her that's all behind them now. What matters is what was left. Glass didn't waste things, and this ring, something capable of breaking the hard ceiling of maximum magic capacity, was clearly the center of his research into magic engineering. The reason he kept it hidden until the end was simpler than any of that. It was meant to be a gift for his daughter. On the way out, Lucy gets quiet. She says she has a habit of not appreciating things until they're already gone, and then admits that's why she followed him. She had something to ask. She looks at him and asks directly whether he's going to Dex Hall, and whether he can find a way not to. Ed is caught off guard. He knows how much it cost her to say that out loud, but he's honest with her. Dex Hall would make his life genuinely easier. Living outside through a cold winter isn't exactly normal. Lucy doesn't argue. She just goes quiet. Then she looks up and says it feels like rain. It isn't. It's snow. Early, unexpected, the kind that doesn't usually show up this time of year. Ed looks at it, then mentions he still hasn't stocked enough firewood for winter, and asks if she'd help. He's already smiling when she figures out what he means, and launches herself at him. She's thrilled, and he confirms it. He's fully settled into camp life now, and that's where the second act of the Swordsman of Sylvania game closes out. The third act is a different animal. The scale gets bigger, the problems get messier. Princess Fenia is gunning for student council president, which puts her on a collision course with Lortel. New students are coming in, bringing new enemies and new players with them. And the final boss of the entire third act, Lucy Merrill, the girl currently living in Ed's camp. He knows none of it will be easy. But for now, he sets the worry aside because he's never seen Lucy show that kind of emotion in any version of the game, any route, any playthrough. That means something. Winter hits hard not long after, and Ed spends half his days just keeping up with the snow and the firewood. Then he gets called for a student scholarship task, which sends him to Principal Obel to turn down his dorm privileges. He walks out with tuition privileges instead, more free time, which sounds great, except he still can't actually rest at home because of Lucy. He's given up on making her leave, not because she'd freeze, her protection magic handles that, but because making her go would just feel wrong to him at this point. So he steps outside to practice with the ring and tries to reach Marilda, the guardian spirit of the forest. Meanwhile, across campus, Clara has resorted to luring Janica to the Laplace bakery with high-quality refreshments, because that was apparently the only way to get her out. Annis is there too. Clara gets straight to it. She tells Janica she's been watching her drift closer and closer to a dangerous line, and that she's completely fallen under Ed's spell. Janica is caught off guard that Clara already knows, but Clara isn't here to talk her out of it. Her read on Ed has changed. What she wants to know is how fast Janica's heart beats around him, how nervous she gets. After enough prodding, Janica admits she feels comfortable around him, snug even. And that's exactly what sets Clara off, because comfortable is the worst possible outcome. In Clara's view, Janica is heading straight for the dreaded role of the girlfriend who's just easy to be around. The problem isn't Ed. It's that Janica is the only one showing any emotion, while Ed has no particular reason to chase her. Following him around, Clara explains, is a losing strategy. Janica's spirit friends quietly give Clara a thumbs up. Clara then resets and gives her actual advice. Stop doing ridiculous things and start activating Ed's instinct to protect. Solid counsel, apparently drawn from a long career of watching her friends' love lives go sideways. Annis sits through all of it in silence. She also knows that Clara is largely the reason Ed's reputation on campus did a full reversal, simply because he's the guy Janica likes and Clara vouched for him. Everyone trusts Ed now. Annis does not. Later, she's back at school and catches Professor Clara getting scolded by the librarian for an overdue book. It does nothing for her confidence in Clara's judgment. And yet, she knows the serious professors all speak highly of Clara's actual abilities, which is its own kind of annoying. On her way in to submit a report, a guy offers to help her carry it. She thanks him and says no. She's a second year in the magic faculty, and she's the reason Assistant Professor Claire, brilliant academic mind, completely hopeless at the practical side of work, has managed to function at all. The research lab stays clean because of Annis. The important tasks get handled because of Annis. She sets the report down on the table, along with something else. A file on Ed Roth Taylor, assembled at a pace that would generously be called thorough and less generously called stalking. Getting caught with it would have been a problem. Outside of Janica and Clara, almost no one knows what she actually looks like. She keeps it that way. To her, human relationships are just a matter of knowing which mask to wear. She has 20 minutes before the professor gets back from the bakery, so she gets to work. Ed is from the Roth Taylor family, the most powerful family in the Clowell Empire. Only son, 2 sisters. She goes through his birth records, his family history, all of it. Her own situation when she enrolled was the opposite of his. Her family was unstable, and she had no safety net. She built everything herself through scholarship work and teaching assistant positions. She respects Lortel for the same reason. She knows what it takes to survive without a cushion. Looking at Ed's background, she draws her conclusions. Someone raised in that kind of controlled, privileged environment probably absorbed a domineering worldview without even realizing it. Her read, he's the type who avoids accountability and gravitates toward women who reflect him positively, who make him feel good about himself. Given the luxury he grew up in, he'd likely prefer someone conventionally attractive. And given his history, a proactive woman would probably put him off. So she decides the right move is to stay unremarkable around him. He's changed since the excommunication. She'll grant him that. But in her estimation, someone who spent decades living one way doesn't just become a different person. More hardworking or not, she's fairly certain the arrogance is still in there somewhere. Annis decides the best way to vet Ed is to become exactly the kind of woman her research says he'd fall for. She's going to run a controlled experiment on a person. The plan gets interrupted when Professor Claire crashes in with bakery goods and knocks over the tea. Claire braces for the fallout. Instead, Annis just asks if she's okay. It's so out of character that Claire doesn't quite know what to do with it. Meanwhile, over in Lucy's room, Ed is thanking Belle, the Academy's chief maid, for cleaning his uniform. Belle appreciates the gratitude, but has an observation. She's been finding a lot of blonde hairs in Lady Lucy's clothes, and a lot of white hairs in Ed's. She also points out that he's been speaking to her with unnecessary formality. Ed explains it just feels right, given how many people she oversees. Belle counters that he's managing quite a few people himself, Lucy, Janica, and Lortel, and tells him she'll handle his laundry regardless of where things stand with any of them. Ophilus Hall is fully restored after all. Then she mentions that 7 new students will be moving in after the break, with one already requesting a room. Ed immediately knows who that is. Tanya Roth Taylor, his younger sister. The break suddenly looks a lot less restful. Not long after, Jick stops by the cabin to let Ed know he'll be heading home for the break to see his best friend Elka. He asks if Ed is staying at camp the whole time. Ed says yes. He wants to use the break to work on medium magic before third year starts. But he tells Jix not to push himself too hard, and when he notices Jix isn't giving off any magic at all, he checks his temperature and asks if he trained past his limit. Jix, who has apparently been using a ring to mask it, gives a vague non-answer. Jix also passes along a message from Aya. She's been asking about Ed and mentioned dragging Taylor over to apologize properly. Ed tells him to let her know he's not upset and doesn't want an apology. Then, since Jix is reliably discreet, Ed hands him money to hire people to organize Professor Glast's basement library. Jix says he doesn't need payment. It's basically training for him. And he learns that Ed wants to turn the library into a workshop. The next day, Annis is standing in for Assistant Professor Claire, who has been awake for 2 days straight doing paperwork. She briefs the scholarship students. Their job is to help prepare the class assignment exam for new students and supervise on the day. Ed notes internally that this used to be Professor Glast's responsibility. Annis moves efficiently. She gets Clebius the equipment he requested from Trix Hall and hands Onyx a portion of Claire's workload. Then she turns her attention to Ed. She's decided to test him. Too many women around him, and she wants to know, for Janica and Claire's sake, whether he can be trusted. She's built the persona. Time to use it. She tells Ed he'll be accompanying her on a field survey, and the two of them head northwest to Orin Mountain. While they work, Annis says she's tired and asks if he is too. He suggests a break. She thanks him in a soft, slightly performative way and tells him he's dispelled all her misconceptions about him. When he asks what she means, she explains she's close to Janica and had been worried about who Janica was spending time with. That's why she'd been cold. Ed shrugs it off. He says he doesn't really care about that and adds that she must be exhausted from juggling the TA work. She responds by taking his arm and telling him it's fine now that he's here. She leans into it, talks about how supported she feels by his presence, mentions that she was also excommunicated from her family and had to put herself through school alone. Ed tells her she's handled it well and not to be too hard on herself about it. She lights up and says they have a lot in common. Ed, for his part, notices that something about her feels off. This isn't the cool, no-nonsense version of Annis he's been dealing with. Then she trips over absolutely nothing and falls into his arms. He catches her and tells her to be careful, but he's clearly clocked that there was nothing to trip on. When she leans further into the dramatics, he just looks confused. She excuses herself to go collect her thoughts. Alone for a moment, Annis runs through her checklist. She established common ground, showed vulnerability so he'd want to protect her, made physical contact a few times. The strategy was solid. The results, though, were inconclusive. And then, almost against her will, she finds herself noting that he's surprisingly built for someone who acts like a bookworm and far more capable at fieldwork than she expected from a noble family's young master. Also, she thinks, objectively speaking, he's gorgeous. No wonder Janica fell for him. Then it hits her. This is exactly how it happens. This is the mechanism. She tells herself she's different and gets back on her feet. Back on the mountaintop, Ed waits for her, taking in the view. For a moment, it clears his head, but the calm doesn't last long. His thoughts drift back to Tanya Roth Taylor and whatever trouble she's likely to bring with her. Tanya Roth Taylor isn't just ambitious. She's the kind of ambitious that comes with a 5-step plan already in motion. A political genius with a talent for manipulation, she's gunning to become the first student council president in Sylvania's history, and she's arrived early specifically to lock in her position before anyone else gets settled. The problem for Ed is that he never expected her this soon. He'd assumed he'd have time to prepare, but the bigger issue is that he genuinely doesn't know how she'll treat him, because in the game, Ed Roth Taylor was barely a character, a villain who flickered across the opening and vanished, with almost nothing in the epilogue to go on. He's working blind, and to Tanya, he's simply garbage. She arrives at the academy by coach, already running a mental inventory of who matters here. Princess Finia of the Clole Empire, Lortel, the trading company executive, Janica, the spirit sorcery prodigy, Alvira, the great alchemist, Clebius, Norton Dale's sword demon, and Lucy, the rare genius mage she seems to admire most of all. This concentration of power and prestige is exactly what she came for. She wants in. Belle meets her at the entrance to handle the room assignment and paperwork, but Tanya has somewhere to be first. Her opening move at Sylvania is to deal with Ed, the family disgrace she intends to remove from the picture before the semester even begins. Shortly after arriving, she receives a letter from her father, Creepin. He backs her ambition fully, but his instructions are measured. Represent the family, show her face, build her position, and do it with manners. Sylvania is a place of learning, so she's to treat professors as masters and regard anyone a grade above her as a senior. Tanya takes that to heart, and she puts it to use immediately, thanking a senior for their time. Then she brings up Ed. She calls him a disgrace, a blemish on the family name, someone who coasted on birth order, hid his incompetence behind arrogance, and barely scraped his way into Sylvania. The senior responds with what sounds like interest, so she keeps going. Then she notices the conversation feels one-sided. Her father had specifically warned her about Lortel, that he'd met with her over the sage's seal grimoire business and that she required particular care. Tanya clocks the hostility and stops mid-sentence. Lortel just smirks and tells her to continue. Tanya stammers, asking if she's upset. Lortel's answer is essentially, "What are you talking about?" which is somehow worse than a direct yes. Meanwhile, Ed is wrapping up his winter break checklist. Workshop organization, scholarship work, medium magic theory, a contract with a high-ranking spirit, all done. He's also picked up 2 mid-rank magic skills, particle explosion and root's desire, from a book in Professor Gast's library. The knowledge is there. Using it is another matter, since the ring is still blocking his magic entirely. So that morning, he does the practical thing and wakes up Lucy to light the fire for him. She does it half asleep, then asks to be left outside to enjoy the warmth. As they sit together, she mentions she can smell perfume on him, Anis's flower scent, from working with her all day. She also asks if he's sick, and when he confirms it, she tells him not to die. Solid advice. She tries to check his magic and finds it completely empty, which earns him an accusation of doing something reckless. He says it's manageable. Then, out of nowhere, she asks him to pat her head. He does, one hand on a book, and she settles in and enjoys it. That quiet moment doesn't last. Lortel appears and greets Ed, noting it's been a while. He assumes she's there about the favor he'd asked, and wonders why she didn't just summon him to the trading company. But Lortel makes it clear this visit is about something else entirely. She has questions. Back on Tanya's end, she's already moved on to her next play. She thanks a pair of seniors for hearing her out and offers them antiques from the Roth-Taylor family storage in exchange for helping her deal with Ed. Elka lights up at the offer. Jix, on the other hand, just stares at her and asks very deliberately whether she's really Ed's younger sister. The magic radiating off him makes it clear he's not someone to underestimate, and Tanya files that away immediately. When she confirms it, something shifts in Jix. He smiles, tells Elka, and then, to Tanya's visible confusion, hands her a mandatory magic engineering item for new students to help train her magic resonance. Elka adds a copy of Professor Delorf's elemental study notes. By the time they're done, she's holding an entire box of first-year essentials. Whatever she came to that meeting expecting, it wasn't this. Tanya can't believe they're brushing off her offer, but Jix waves it away. Siblings fight. It's just how it goes. Then he finally introduces himself properly. Second-year student, Ed's junior, and someone who owes Ed enough to consider them close. He gives Tanya a reassuring pat on the back and tells her she'll be fine, noble blood and all. Then he and Elka board their ship home, leaving Tanya standing there buried under a box of gifts she never asked for, annoyed that her recruitment pitch somehow turned into a care package. Over in Assistant Professor Claire's office, Anis is taking stock of the break. If the new student assignment exam goes smoothly, she figures they'll have earned some breathing room. Claire returns the compliment. Anis has carried most of the scholarship workload herself. Most of the students stumbled through it. Ed didn't. His document processing had no flaws, and the practical problems he solved were at a level you'd rarely see from high-ranking nobles. That detail lands with Anis. Claire adds something she's been sitting on. After the Ophalos Hall incident, she followed Ed and found he'd built a camp larger than their lab, alone, by hand, with tools. She's clearly impressed. Then she mentions the spirit contract, and that's what really recalibrates Anis's read on him. His practical ability has nothing to do with his upbringing. She turns it over in her head. She'd looked into Ed because of Janika's interest. Her conclusion, he's decent, hardworking, and not arrogant. Even Claire likes him. And then her thoughts drift. His physique, the way he carries himself, the fact that he apparently smells good, and Claire has to call her name to bring her back. Anis opens the windows like the room is on fire. Claire asks if she's overdone it. Anis barely hears her. She's just connected something. Claire said Ed made a spirit contract, and a contract that difficult almost certainly required Janika's help, which means the spirit he contracted with is loyal to Janika, which means that spirit could have reported everything back to her, including Anis's attempts to get close to Ed. She's out the door before Claire can suggest lunch. A brief note on Janika failover. Her family's motto is harmony and coexistence, and she's always lived it. Genuine friends, no shortage of warmth. What's currently eating at her is what she's learned about Anis and Ed, which makes the timing of Tanya's arrival unfortunate. Tanya came on Lortel's advice, working her way through the academy, introducing herself and building a case against Ed. Janika was supposed to be an easy conversation, kind, measured, approachable. Instead, Tanya walks up and finds a spirit rising behind her that looks like it has opinions. Lortel's description of Janika was apparently out of date. In Ed's camp, Janika wraps up the practical side of things. Most of the production materials he needed are sorted, though legendary rank items are scarce in winter. He thanks her for fitting it in around her schedule. She tells him not to worry about it, and when he asks why she came in person, she says she needed the rest. That's her story, and she's keeping it. Then Lortel spots Lucy asleep in the camp and asks what's going on. Ed's explanation, that it's winter, does not satisfy her. She lets it go and gets to the point. She shows him the sage's sealed grimoire and the letter, his written promise to do anything she asked in exchange for her bidding on it. She's here to collect, and she's smiling about it. Ed asks how far she's planning to take this. She tells him she's not going to ask for anything unreasonable. What she wants is simple. She wants him on her side. The third act is starting. The conflict between Princess Fenya and Lortel is about to open up, and Lortel is already moving. Fenya Elias Cole is her fated opponent, the one who, according to how this story is supposed to go, wins the student council presidency, takes control of the academy, and eventually uses that power to start pulling at the threads of the Roth-Taylor family in the fourth act. Ed points out that he's just a student. His support probably won't shift the outcome. Lortel doesn't disagree, but she tells him his reputation in the academy is growing, and more importantly, this isn't about politics. It's personal. That's enough for Ed. He's in. Ed has seen Lortel run calculations in her sleep, but that night, for the first time, she just looked happy. Not strategically happy. Actually happy. It's a small thing, but he notices it. The next morning, he's up early, same as always, asking Lucy to get the fire going. The night before, Lortel had filled him in on something he hadn't seen coming. His little sister Tanya had been making moves. Lortel isn't sure whether Tanya genuinely considers Ed a threat to the family, or whether it's just the ordinary low-grade resentment that comes with being a sibling. Either way, she'd introduced Tanya to a few people. And now, that same morning, Tanya shows up at his door with some of her workers and a gift in hand. She's nervous, visibly, but there's no malice in it, which isn't what Ed had expected. He tries to work out why she'd be scared of him, and then it hits him. He thinks back to what his life must have looked like from her side, growing up at the estate. He's been reading her wrong. Then he stands up and she flinches. That pulls up a specific memory. A maid who once offered him food in Tanya's presence and what he did to her. Tanya had begged him to stop. He'd told her that attachment to servants was beneath her. He remembers it clearly now. Back in the present, he thanks Tanya for the gift and tells her he'll wear it when the next semester starts. He also acknowledges plainly that he's been excommunicated, technically no longer her brother, but that the gesture still means something to him. Then he waves her toward the fire and tells a half-asleep Lucy, who looks like she's still negotiating with consciousness, to get the guests settled. He goes inside and comes back out with drinks. He asks Tanya who she's been talking to. She admits it's been about him. Then he says Janika's name and the whole group goes stiff. Ed mentions casually that Janika is the kindest person he knows. Tanya agrees, a little too forcefully, and explains that Janika was very kind, very strong, and also summoned a high-level spirit fire lizard that threw all their workers across the room. Then she catches herself and walks it back entirely, insisting Janika was simply kind and wished her well. Ed asks directly whether Janika really summoned a high-level spirit. Tanya says no, absolutely not. She doesn't know what she was saying. Ed can see exactly what's happening, so he decides to just say it. He tells her he's doing his best now, living with the consequences of being excommunicated, and that he knows he made the estate a bad place to be. He apologizes for what he can't undo. Then he tells her he heard she's planning to run for student council president and that he'll be cheering for her. He means it, even knowing she won't win. In the story, Tanya is on Fenia's side. She's not the one who ends up with the seat, but she's still family, and that counts for something to him now. Tanya stares at him like she's seen something that shouldn't exist. Ed has no idea what to make of her expression, or where things go from here. Back at Apilles Hall, she talks herself down. Ed is still the same person, she decides, just better at hiding it. The only reason she's not saying so out loud is that Janika nearly burned someone for less. That part is hard to dismiss. Janika isn't performing loyalty, she actually believes in him. Still, Tanya can't square it. A place full of elite students, and none of them have seen through him yet. She's holding out for the moment his mask slips. Then she reaches her door and finds someone standing next to it. Unpolished, a little rough around the edges. Someone she recognizes from Ed's camp. The girl immediately asks if she's Ed's little sister, and tells her to come knock if she ever needs anything. Tanya watches her disappear into the next room, then looks at the door. There's a golden nameplate on it, the kind reserved for the top students in the academy. The name on it is Lucy Merrill. The legendary genius mage is Ed's neighbor, and apparently also his errand girl who lights his morning fire. Tanya's entire framework for understanding this situation has just collapsed.